Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the City of Milton Planning Commission. I am Peyton Jamison, Chairman. This is a 7-member commission appointed by the City of Milton Mayor and City Council, created for the purpose of holding public hearings and making recommendations on rezoning, use permits, concurrent variance applications, comprehensive land use plan, and plan map, and other related plans and amendments to the zoning ordinance. I will introduce the board members. To my left is Fred Edwards, Paul Moore. To my right is Chris Doty, Mark Bittner, and Noel Carpenter. The petitions will be heard in the sequence listed on the posted agenda. I would like to acquaint you with some of the rules and procedures conducting this meeting. The applicant and all those speaking in support of an application will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present the petition. The applicant may choose to save some of the time for rebuttal following the presentation by the opposition. The opposition will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present its position. If time remains, the opposition will be allowed to rebut. Since the burden of proof is upon the applicant will be allowed to make closing remarks provided time remains with the allotted time. The staff of the Community Development Department will be keeping track of time and will inform you periodically of the remaining time for your presentation. Each speaker must fill out a speaker card before speaking and leave it with a staff member of the Community Development Department. All speakers will identify themselves by name, address, and organization, if applicable, before beginning their presentation. When an opponent of a rezoning action is made within 2 years immediately preceding the filing of the rezoning action being opposed, campaign contributions aggregating $250 or more to a local government official of the local government which will consider the application, it shall be the duty of the opponent to file a disclosure with the governing authority of the respective local government at least 5 days prior to the Planning Commission meeting. A violation of the relevant state statute constitutes a misdemeanor. Therefore, if you have contributed $250 or more to a council member and you have not filed a disclosure prior to the Planning Commission meeting, the city attorney strongly suggests that you have someone else speak for your point of view. Each application has been properly filed with the Department of Community Development. Signs have been posted on each site. The matter has been advertised and notices have been mailed to property owners affected by this zoning as required by the Milton zoning ordinance. The Planning Commission's recommendation will be forwarded to the City of Milton Mayor and City Council for final disposition. The Mayor and City Council hearing will be held approximately 3.5 weeks from this hearing on the third Monday of each month at 6 p.m. in the council chambers. The Community Development Department has reviewed each application in conjunction with various agencies and departments, both internal and external to the city. Staff's recommendations, findings, and conclusions are here before us in written form, which has been made available to all petitioners and to the public. Demonstration of any sort within the chamber is prohibited, so please refrain from any applause, dialogue with the person speaking, or outburst. Please turn off all cell phones or place them on silent. All remarks will be addressed by the Planning Commission. Please show the same respect to the person speaking that you will expect to receive yourself. In addition, the applicant shall not submit material to the Planning Commission during the meeting unless requested to do so by the Commission. All material that you wish to be reviewed by the Commission in consideration of your application should be submitted to the staff of the Community Development Department to be included in the normal distribution of packages to the Commission. Finally, to the applicant, if your petition is deferred in accordance with the Milton zoning ordinance, you are required to update or obtain a new sign for reposting. Failure to update or repost will result in further delay. There are no exceptions. At this point, I'll call for general public comment. That's anything, if there's any general public comment, Robin, that is not on the agenda?
No, there's not.
Okay, I will close public comment and approval of action minutes. So next, any revisions to the action minutes?
I move we accept the Planning Commission action minutes of Wednesday, May 27th.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Okay. I'm going to play two people here. The first item is RZ 1513 3225 Francis Road by Sixto Omar Martinez Rivera to rezone from AG1 to R3 residential to develop 2 single-family residences.
That must be at page 16. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, this is item RZ 1513 on Francis Road, and you'll see the location as it's tucked between on three sides by Crooked Creek subdivision. This is the current zoning is AG1. Most of the area is surrounded by CUP, and then AG1 across the street on the north side of Francis. The future land use map for this area calls for medium density residential in that brown tan area. To the right, you'll see a blue that is a church further down the road. This is a site plan submitted for 2 lots, approximately 32,000 square feet in size each. This is a subject site with a house and a garage that's has nobody living in it at this time. This is from the rear of those 2 buildings. So, as I said, it contains approximately 1.45 acres and developed with a single-family residence on the south side. It is also located, again, within the medium-density residential designation of the 2030 Comprehensive Plan map, which equals 1 to 3 units per acre. I also like to note that this property is within the Highway 9 Overlay District, which does not require the rural view shed. It is not within the rural Milton overlay, which on the north side of Francis Road is. The applicant is requesting a rezoning to R3 to develop 2 single-family residences on 0.7 acre lots at an overall density of 1.38 units per acre. Obviously, the existing home will be torn down to allow the construction of 2 new homes. And I'll just go quickly through some site plan analysis that was based on the site plan submitted on April 30th. This is a table that kind of makes an overview, or not an overview, but it discusses each development standard. It meets all the standards of the R3 district. The minimum lot size, I'll just note, is 18,000 square feet, but the actual lot sizes are 32,000. The minimum heated floor area for R3 is 1,300 for a 2-story and 1,200 for less than 2-story. And the applicant's letter of intent has indicated a minimum of 2,400 square feet. Public involvement at the CZIM meeting on May 26th. The applicant was present. There were 4 citizens in attendance for the subject site. They were all residents of Crooked Creek and voiced concern about the location, size, overall look of the homes, and if they would be operating businesses within the homes. Also, they asked staff if a buffer would be required between Crooked Creek and the proposed lots. In response, staff stated that no buffers or landscape strips are required between single-family residential zoning districts, which that is what the CUP and the R3 are in this situation. The public participation report, we received it on June 12th. The applicant held a meeting on June 9th at their offices on Highway 9, and there was no one that were in attendance. At the City of Milton Design Review Board courtesy review on June 2nd, the DRB made comments to provide barrier plantings between Crooked Creek and new structures on subject site, design homes to be consistent with architecture of Crooked Creek homes, and thirdly, require city architect to review building plans. As far as standards of review, the proposed 2 lots developed at a density of 1.38 units per acre is consistent with adjacent Crooked Creek subdivision to the east, south, and west, developed at 2 units per acre in that particular CUP. The minimum lot size is 12,000 square foot. Front setback is 35, side setback is 7.5, rear is 35, and a minimum 2,000 square feet pursuant to RZ 93-08. And this is specifically for the pod that's adjacent to the subject site. So it's not Crooked Creek. It's developed with different sizes within the large subdivision. To the north, it is zoned AG1 with scattered single-family lots and the use permit for canine assistance. It is staff's opinion that the proposed use and density is suitable with adjacent properties within the city. Again, it's staff's opinion that the proposal may not adversely affect existing or usability of adjacent properties if approved with the recommended conditions. In regards to the comprehensive plan map, it is consistent at 1.38 units per acre with the proposed or with the recommended medium density residential, which is 1 to 3 units per acre. And lastly, the proposed 2 lots are consistent with the City of Milton's 2030 comprehensive land plan and adjacent and nearby properties. Therefore, staff recommends approval conditional of RZ 1513 to R3. And I won't go through all the minutia of the recommended conditions, but it is obviously conditioned to single-family detached and accessory uses and structures. No more than 2 dwelling units would be permitted. Also, I will make a statement. There was a question at the CZIM about home businesses. There are very strict restrictions about somebody who applies for a home business license, and they would have to follow those guidelines if there was one, just as any other single-family residence would in the city. Again, it would be conditioned to the site plan received on April 30th, and the other conditions would be minimum 32 square foot lots, minimum heated floor area would be 2,400 square feet, and there's some dedications and improvements. Basically, we want to see the sidewalk connected on either side that's already existing through Crooked Creek, as well as dedicating the necessary right-of-way. And lastly, the transportation engineer recommends access shall be limited to 1 driveway within the Francis Road right-of-way. And this speaks to the sidewalk as well. And with that, that's staff's presentation, and I'll take any questions from the Planning Commission at this time.
All right. Any questions before the applicant comes up?
Okay,
All right.
I'll go run to my other chair. So I have the applicant's representative, Scott Reese.
Members of the Commission, I am Scott Reese with Brumlow Reese & Associates, doing business at 13685 Highway 9, Milton, Georgia, 30004. I'm here tonight representing the Rivera family in their application to rezone the property located at 3225 Francis Road from its current zoning of AG1 to proposed zoning of R3. On the 1.45 acre site, we're proposing 2 lots, a minimum of 32,000 square feet with minimum house sizes of 2,400 square feet. If the application goes through, the homes will be constructed by Fuquay & Associates, a longtime builder in the city of Milton. For the applicants, they will be 4-sided brick. One will be a roughly 2,600 square foot ranch-style house. The other a roughly 3,200 square foot 2-story house. There is sewer available, and it is close enough that it is a mandatory connection. As so adequately stated by staff, we're surrounded by Crooked Creek on 3 sides with a CUP zoning with minimum 12,000 square foot lots and 2,000 square foot houses. We have canine assistance across the street, a special use permit, dog training. We are in compliance with the future land use plan. We're not seeking any variances for anything. Everything will be designed to code. We are fine with all conditions except for 4A-1II. The applicant requests 2 drives. They've had a appraisal on the property. The difference between a single drive and 2 drives is significant in the resale of homes. In my 30 years experience, joint driveways with easements, if anyone sells, becomes a maintenance and upkeep nightmare. We have put, I don't know if many of you are here a long time, but I'm sure you remember the Cogburn Road driveway with the chain link fence down the middle between the 2, the son and the father, and the son sold. So we're trying to avoid that. We understand that any driveways will have to meet all City of Milton engineering, site distance requirements, and separation. We will take that up with the staff at a later date. Finally, we feel that this applicant should be treated the same as all other Milton citizens, since there are no buffers or plannings required in any other density or any other zonings where you have like zonings. and no architectural review is required for structures in the Highway 9 overlay, and to my knowledge, on residential. If it is, we feel that all projects that come in before you should be held to the same scrutiny that my applicants will be held to. I will reserve the rest of my time for rebuttal if need be, and to answer any questions. Thank you for your time.
Let me ask, I have one other person that wants to speak in opposition. Do I have anybody else that's come since the time that wants to speak on this item? Okay. With none other, I will call Michael Schaefer.
Afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Michael Schaefer, 540 Heron Run, Milton, Georgia. I'm probably one of the most affected of this land. I look right into the backyard, into the back of their house. I have about maybe 30 feet, until the land changes, and I'm the one that's been at all these meetings and tried to get to his meeting. He wasn't there. To get a buffer zone or put some evergreens in or some kind of blockage. There's about 9 houses around the area that it's affected. But it's mostly affected on both sides of the property, not so much the back, because there's already a built-up buffer zone that's weeded and stuff that's so high that the neighborhood of that side probably not going to see the back of the house. So I'm asking, for them to throw in some evergreens or some kind of brush that will grow over time to block at least all the way through their backyard. I had somebody from the council was at work come and take pictures. So I don't know if you guys have any pictures beyond what was just shown. But so I'm not blocking them putting 2 houses on. I just want a buffer zone. More than anything else. They don't have to run by Crooked Creek rules. We have 8,000 rules at Crooked Creek. And they're right within the 9 houses that are there. So that's it. Any questions?
Thank you.
Good.
I do not have any other comment cards.
Okay. Scott?
I do apologize. I left right before 8 o'clock. I called the gentleman very next morning. I think he will agree to that, to address any concerns, and I offered to meet him on the site. He said, that it was adequate, my explanation. Finally, this is the same use. It's just not a typical thing that in the same neighborhood or the same use that you require buffers. If you need a buffer, I'm sad to say, it's typically your responsibility to plant, not your neighbor's. If your neighbor plants a buffer and it dies, and then code enforcement really doesn't have the ability to come in and tell them to replant. So, as much as I hate that things do change in the city of Milton, we just about all get new neighbors and changes, and we're completely compliant within the special use or the comprehensive land use plan and all of the rules for this particular zoning. Thank you.
Would you like to rebut any of that? Would you like to say anything else?
Mr. Schaefer.
He did call me in the morning to get that straight.
Okay. Would you come up to the mic if you have anything? Thank you.
I don't have anything new to say. I planted a bunch of evergreens. Planted are $70 a piece. So to make peace with the neighborhood, with the 9 of us, is to put some money behind it on a some kind of buffer. And he did call me in the morning. We showed up at like 20 to 8. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any final thing? Any final remarks, Scott?
I don't know any more I can say except answer any questions if you guys have. As much as I like hearing myself talk, I really don't.
Sounds good to me. All right. That will close public comment. Questions for staff or the applicant?
I have one.
Go ahead.
Do we have any kind of zoom or closer in overhead view of this, of the site, where we can actually see see the perimeter? Is it possible to get it up on our screen, or can we Google somehow
I
with
can-
this computer?
I'll get it for you, Noel. Hold on a second. I'll keep on asking the lawyer.
Okay, I mean, that would be my question, and then and so that way I could see what the extent of this open area is between the properties.
I can probably do it on the other laptop if you want it bigger to be on the screen.
Okay, I mean, I wouldn't be in favor of some type of technically having a buffer, a space. But if there is some type of landscaping
Yeah,
allowance
if you
that we
want,
can
actually,
maybe
Michelle will look for
see
it while
what's
we're
going on.
talking. I'm
then we
sorry.
then we can figure out what that is, but I
So-
just don't know what
Let
I'm
me-
talking about.
I can also make another comment that I believe Scott, Mr. Reese has commented in the past, that the two houses will be closer to one another on the center lines and away from the side property lines. Do you want to confirm that? Or has that changed?
There are going to be 100-foot wide lots, and the typical houses that we build in the city of Milton, the vast majority of the open space is going to be in the rear yard. There is not room. I'm not here to deceive anyone. No, I mean, they're going to fill side to side. That's just the nature of the beast. They're 100 feet wide lots, and we're not building, 1,000 square foot cottages. I mean, they're going to be relatively large houses. So, side to side, they're pretty well going to fill. I mean, everyone wants as much privacy as they can. The builders, the future owners. So, I mean, I can't imagine that they're going to do something that would negatively affect. I mean, there's several dollars in the purchase of the property and several dollars in the construction of the home. So, I would think that they're going to adequately protect their investment like everyone else in the city of Milton. So I just don't understand why we would treat these guys differently than we would anyone else, unless there's some route that I don't know about.
Michelle was our hero.
Robin, was staff presented with
Vegetation on
a
this one than there is on this sideline.
proposed placement of the houses? Have you seen anything
The site plan,
in the,
I mean, it's not,
the large map that we've got? Doesn't it just
It
basically
depicts-
plots the
right.
existing?
so
property?
that's all that was submitted.
Okay.
Are there any buffers required in Crooked Creek?
No, there's no buffers required within Crooked Creek or between two different zoning districts that are single-family residential.
All right.
But my gosh, I got all this.
I took two pictures of my desk.
I mean, you guys right there.
Want to see any pictures, y'all?
Sure. What the heck is this passing?
You can bring them up. Thank you.
Scott, does the developer have any plan to preserve any of the specimen trees that are noted on the site?
Yes. With my meeting with the applicant, since Francis Road is not a subdivision cul-de-sac street, there is a fair amount of traffic. We decided upon placing the front of the houses 80 feet back from the right-of-way on a preliminary. There is a poplar that's noted that's not the most scenic tree, and it may or may not go. The problem you were asking about site plan, it's very hard to ask an applicant to spend, thousands of dollars on site plans when I can't guarantee them that I'm going to get a zone. So, I have a footprint, I have an approximate house location, and other than that, when I get into the deep engineering, the cash register is running very rapidly.
Sure.
So,
And it looks like the lots are about 300 feet deep.
that is correct. 32,000, roughly 105 foot wide and 300 feet deep.
And
32,000.
so on the two that you described, the 3,200 square foot, two-story, and I think you said 20-some hundred foot ranch.
Yeah, it's roughly, they have very preliminary house sketches. Until
Right.
we can go forward, they're not going to
Yeah, no, I understand.
go into the minutia.
And just so we can hypotheticals,
Yes,
so I
okay.
can at least get an appreciation for where it might go. So if it's 80 feet back, you've still got plenty of that makes sense to me. Get away from the street noise of
Yes.
Francis. Although Francis is not a major road, it's still a busy road.
Yes.
I don't know what the standard depth is of a
Typically,
of a standard 3,200 square foot home.
right, now, if we move into the three-car garage scenario, then you add some more depth in. We are typically running into keeping rooms off the kitchens, and we're adding, so our depth for many years, 35 feet.
Yeah.
We're looking at a lot of 45 and 50 foot deep, but not, these are not going to be hayfield houses.
Yeah.
But I would think and there will be side-loaded garages, so
That's my
you
next
have to
question.
have
They
a
are side-loaded.
turnaround space. Yes, not front-loaded garages. This price range, that's a no-no. So I would think a 40 by 60 footprint is going to get you pretty close, maybe 45 by 65.
Okay, thank you. And a question for Robin. Staff's recommendation was a single drive. Was that a transportation recommendation? Or
That was, yes.
And do we know the rationale behind that?
In general, I believe the Transportation Department likes to reduce the number of curb cuts on any kind of road, so I think they looked at the opportunity to do a shared driveway, but I think I can't really speak to what they would think of having two driveways. Their first preference would be to have a shared driveway.
And I can't think of a zoning that we've had come before us where we've done a shared drive.
I
So it's-
agree.
It's inconsistent with what we've done historically.
it.
To be honest, we've never really done just a two-lot subdivision in this configuration,
Yeah.
so with that said, it's apples to
Okay.
oranges, so.
Okay. All right, thank you. And the last thing is, Robin, I don't see because it's not a proposed site plan, is there a is the applicant required to do any water retention or detention?
I
on
believe
this?
it would just be single, it was as though it was a minor plat, so everything will be done on each lot,
Okay.
just like when somebody subdivides into two lots. So there's no a detention pond
There's
required or
nothing
anything.
required by subdivision standards?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Any other questions?
So, Scott, I noticed that it has a well there. You're going to just fill that in?
Yes, it is a shallow hand-dug well, so it will have to be to Fulton County Health Department standards. So, yeah.
Okay, because
that's just a-
since you said they have sewer, then
Yes.
naturally they're going to have the water.
Yes.
Okay.
Also, I want to make a point that on the service delivery agreement with Fulton County, this was covered. I mean, it's a little sawtooth out of it, but just want to reiterate that it was already a part of the agreement, so there doesn't need to be any kind of changes to the sewer intergovernmental agreement.
And it is a mandatory connection
Right.
within a certain distance. We have no, if we wanted to do septic, we can't.
I do agree, though, that I think, I think it needs to be with the homes that he's developed to have two driveways.
Oh, I totally agree with that. Yeah. Yep. Any other questions? I'd like to open it up for a motion.
How's it written?
I move that we accept RZ 15-13 approval conditional on the adding of the requested driveway.
So basically you want to delete that condition.
Delete item
Or to
one.
add.
Delete staff's recommendation.
staff's,
for the
yes.
choice.
Make it two drivers.
Second that.
All right, I have a motion by Commissioner Edwards, second by Commissioner Bittner. Any discussion? All,
Yeah, just to encourage Scott, if this gets approved, just encourage the applicant to make sure that, number one, they do their very best to preserve the trees, the specimen trees that are on the property, and then obviously if there is something that has to go away, we would expect recompense on those trees that are taken out. And I would hope that they would also comply with what you suggested tonight in terms of setbacks. I think the 80 feet makes a lot of sense. And but also give consideration to the placement to the rear for the benefit of those in Crooked Creek.
all right, any other discussion? All those in favor? say
Aye.
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 Opposed? Yeah, it's unanimous. All right, Robin?
So the next item is the impact fee study discussion and review of methodology report and the capital improvements element draft reports presented by Mr. Bill Ross. And just as a reminder, this will take a few minutes, but anybody else who wants to speak for the CSO on the next item, they can go ahead and give me cards.
You ready for me, Robin? Oh, okay.
Oh, here, I need to give you the, you have the point right here?
Mr. Chairman, Planning Commission members, got a lot to cover today, so I'm going to talk fast. But let me say this. If anybody has a question at any time, let me know. Make a noise, because you might not remember the question by the time we get to the end of all this, and I want to be sure that of the things that I'm going to be covering, that I also cover anything that you want me to talk about or mention with regard to impact fees. And I am Bill Ross with Ross Associates. Our offices are in Atlanta, with a sub-office in my home in Madison, Georgia. What I want to cover today is who the consultant team is, and the team, of course, includes staff members with the city. Where are we in the process? What are some basic impact fee items that we need to keep in mind as we go through this study? I'm going to talk about a methodology report that has been prepared, as well as a capital improvements element, and what's next on the horizon. As I mentioned, I'm Bill Ross with Ross Associates. AMEC Foster Wheeler is also assisting with this work. Lee Walton and Paige Hatley. Paige is with us with her hand up. And, of course, the city's staff, particularly Kathy Field, Michelle McIntosh Ross, and the various department heads that have been involved, fire, police, et cetera, Parks and Recreation. And I want to emphasize, I get to stand up and get all the credit, but Michelle and Paige in particular have worked very, very hard on these studies and getting these things together. So I want to be sure that they're recognized for their hard work on this. This this difficult to read chart is sort of the overall workflow chart for the project. And if I can get the pointer to point, of course you can't see what I'm pointing at anyway. So basically, up at the top, the green, an assessment report has already been done and presented to the city council, just to get an overview of what we could or couldn't address in impact fees. The methodology report, the first little blue square, has been done and discussed with the advisory council, advisory committee. The capital improvements element, the next blue square, is also been completed in draft form, and that's coming forward. And the next step, the round circle, is that the capital improvements element, the so-called CIE, gets submitted to the Atlanta Regional Commission for regional review. They, in turn, send a copy up to the state, to the Department of Community Affairs for review, and that takes up to 60 days. Sometimes it's 30 days. It's a bit. While that review is going on, we will be working on the impact fee ordinance, as well as working with staff on the administration of an impact fee program, putting a program in place on their computer so that they can make impact fee assessments, et cetera. And if everything works as it should, hopefully we will get word back from the state and ARC on the CIE about the same time that the ordinance is ready for consideration, and we may be able to adopt the CIE and the ordinance itself at the same meeting, if timing works out. This little diagram puts together all of the reports and what happens, what parts go where, what happens with this. The upper left-hand group of squares is the methodology report, and in very simplistic terms, that includes forecasts of population and housing units and employment. It includes a listing of all of the projects that the city has planned or actually in the budget that are impact fee eligible in one way or another, in whole or in part, and a calculation of what the maximum impact fees could be in the impact fee program. The reason we calculate the maximum is because the law says you can't charge more than a fair share. So the question is, what's the fair share? Because that's your ceiling. You know that the city can't adopt a fee higher than that. They can adopt a fee lower than that, but they just can't go over the maximum, which is why we calculate it. It's not a recommendation for adoption. It's merely a calculation of what the ceiling may be. The square to the right of that, the capital improvements element, it's drawn from the methodology report. The forecasts go into the CIE to quantify the needs of the city in the future to serve new growth and development. And the projects also go into the CIE to indicate to the region and to the state how are we going to meet those needs with capital improvements. And the next square under the CIE, of course, is going through the ARC and DCA review. Back to the methodology report, that bottom square was the maximum impact fee calculations. That doesn't go to the state. They don't ask for that. They could care less. But that ultimately will plug into what your fee schedule will be that the city council adopts as part of the ordinance. And again, they don't necessarily have to adopt the maximum. They can adopt proportions of the various fees that way.
Bill, I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Under the forecast section of the methodology report, is that modeled off of, or let me ask the question differently, how is that modeled? Without going into a great deal of detail tonight, because there's obviously a lot for us to get through. Is part of it from the 2025 master plan or comprehensive land use plan that we did, where we did some modeling as a city for what we thought our growth was going to look like? Or is that,
no,
is there more contemporary?
We sort of started from scratch. We looked at a lot of data sources. And in fact, there's an appendix in both the methodology report and the CIE that goes into enormous detail about how these projections are made. The simplistic answer is we did data regressions on various models. We looked at what ARC had modeled for the entire North Fulton super district. We looked at census numbers over the past decade. The census even went back and redid their estimates before you were even a city, which helped us some.
Yeah.
So we ran data regressions and discovered that basically a data regression says if you keep going the way you've been going, here's where you're going to end up.
Yeah.
Um,
And some of the
Well,
charts
we're-
that I looked at had some projections that were above what we had originally forecasted. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking back to the numbers that we had generated when
Yeah.
we did when we were becoming a city and putting
Yeah.
some of our ordinances in place. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's like good news and bad news.
Yeah.
You know, it's like 20% higher than we had originally forecast, which is,
Yeah.
you know, bad news for those of us who are going to be talking here in a few minutes about, you know, conservation subdivisions and what
Yeah.
that looks like and the impact on the city and how we're going to grow. But it also is enlightening from the standpoint of knowing that there's a cap with your maximum impact fee part that may serve us well to have
Yeah.
the numbers up. Doesn't mean we necessarily have to live to those numbers at the end of the day, right?
Well, after doing all those projections and whatnot, we realized that they resulted in more people, more housing units than the city can contain.
Yeah, that was actually.
And so
that's
we
what brought it to
actually
my attention.
backed back, and Michelle was critically helpful in this, in doing an estimate of how many more houses can be built
Right.
in the city. And so we backed back down to that level. So in essence, this thing says by 2035, in the next 20 years, you're going to be built out
Yeah.
if those
Yeah,
projections
those are
hold
the numbers
true.
that got my attention, and they were bigger
Yeah.
than I had ever recalled
Yeah.
us discussing.
Yeah. But
Is
you've
there an
been,
accountability to that at the end of the day? Does the state come back and say, if we're basing our impact fees on maximums that are forecasted, that are larger than our build-out can be?
No.
How does the accountability?
well, I mean, the
work?
build-out is the maximum now. We pulled all of the
Okay.
numbers down to the maximum, so we're not showing growth beyond what the city could actually accommodate.
Okay,
And so, but they don't usually get into that level of detail in comments anyway.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, like the margin for error, like you said. I mean, you've got a 20-year plan for 10,000 more housing units to be added.
Yeah.
That could happen in 12 years. You know,
Yes,
I mean, it could happen
it
in
could.
18 years. I mean,
Good. An important thing to remember is that these reports do not live on forever. In fact, the methodology report, you should come back within no more than 5 years and revisit all of these numbers. Cost estimates will be different. Pace of growth may be different.
okay.
May have slowed down, may have speeded up. Who knows? Who knows? But it is, and we'll get to why later. But it is very, very important that we're showing a build-out population. Maybe you'll get there, maybe you won't within 20 years.
Okay.
Don't know. But it is. You will go back and revisit those numbers from time to time as you go along.
You know, by law, Robin, by charter, we have to go back and think anyway. So, all right, thank you very much.
Just a couple of items of impact fee basis. I mentioned that we can't charge new growth and development more than their fair share, which is exactly why we're doing those maximum calculations. There has to be a connection between the fee that's being charged and the improvements being made. The U.S. Supreme Court likes to call that the rational nexus, so that the fee relates, in fact, to providing the facilities that we say are going to be needed specifically to serve new growth. And another thing that came out of the U.S. Supreme Court in another ruling, the calculations don't have to be mathematically precise, but they got to be a rough proportionality. Now, you've seen the reports, and you know we're way beyond rough proportionality. We're pretty close to mathematically precise. But in some cases, we just have to make estimates. And the impact fee law basically says you need to use your best estimates in preparing these, because we're not so good at predicting the future in all cases. Just a few more. Calculations have to be made in present value. That results in a fairly elaborate calculation. And I'm going to give you a quick analysis. If you decide you want to take a vacation in $2,000. I guess you'd want to go in 2020. If you're going to take a vacation in 2020, you've got the brochure, you know where you want to go, and you know how much it's going to cost you today if you took that trip on a tour, say. The question is, how much money do you need in 2020 to go on that same trip? And the net present value is a calculation that, first of all, takes today's cost and inflates it to the year that you expect to be spending that money. And let's say this trip is going to cost you $10,000 today. Maybe it's going to be $11,000 in 2020. But knowing that you need $11,000 by 2020 to go on that trip, you're also going to be putting money in the bank as you go along, saving up for that. So you're going to be making a little interest on the money you put in the bank. So you don't have to put all $11,000 in the bank. You have to put in enough money that gaining interest will produce $11,000 in 2020. And that percentage is called the discount rate. And as you well know, you're not making much on your savings these days. So it's a very important item in the calculations. We use a number of different inflation rates based on exactly what kind of an expenditure we're looking at, whether it's a cost of money inflation, whether it's inflation in construction costs, or inflation in building costs based on the facilities that we're looking at. But it does push the net present value today is a good deal higher than just the cost estimate for today if you went out and bought that fire truck or bought that acre of land today as you go forward. We have to provide the same level of service to new development and the existing population and businesses. We can't use impact fees to create an improvement for new development while existing folks are only responsible for the old level. So there again, that goes into the calculations. And there are two ways that new development basically pays its way. One of those ways is they pay property taxes. As development occurs, people start paying property taxes that goes into the general fund. So the impact fee is the net of the total new development would owe minus the taxes that they're going to generate. So the actual impact fee, the maximum number we calculate, presumes that as growth goes along, taxes are coming into the general fund through property tax levies. And I also want to mention that the impact fees are just not etched in stone. If the city adopts impact fees, you will be required to file an annual update. They call it an update, but it's really a financial report. But each year you'll file that report. How much did you collect? What'd you do with it? How much did you keep? How much did you spend? What did you spend it on? And that sort of thing. And as I mentioned, the whole CIE needs to be reviewed from time to time, particularly depending on the pace of growth and development. If it starts deviating, if you will, from what was projected, it's time to come back and revisit it on a sooner basis than if things just are going along just fine. But you will find the best laid plans of mice and men. 5 years from now, it'll be different. Comment on how we calculate these impact fees. As I mentioned, you start off with the project cost. How much would it cost to buy that fire truck today, for instance? Then you adjust that cost using the inflation and discount rate to a net present. And you also subtract credits for the property taxes that new growth is going to be paying that would find its way back into those same projects. They don't get a credit for property taxes, they pay for general government, et cetera. But to the extent that they're paying property taxes that the city will be using for those same capital improvements, that becomes a credit. And that's how we get down to the maximum impact fee. The first of the two reports tonight is the methodology report. The methodology report has everything in it with regard to what projects are on the, quote, the list, what were the cost estimates, how did we calculate these maximums, how much is shared between the existing tax base and the future growth and development. And I've listed over here on the right, in a general sense, what's in that methodology report. We talk about those forecasts in population, housing, and employment, the cost adjustments and credits. We look at what the various inflation rates are, how you do a net calculation. We even make projections with regard to the tax base of the city, reflecting only new growth and development, as opposed to, you know, those incremental. I'm sure everybody's gotten their latest tax bill from the tax assessor so far. Those adjustments are ignored. We're only looking at what's the contribution of new growth and development to the tax base. And then each facility category, we're looking at parks and recreation, fire protection, law enforcement, and road improvements. For each of those categories, we talk about the service area, the level of service, project cost estimates, impact, and the impact fee calculations. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the maximum fees are included in this report. This is a summary table. If you just look at the right-hand column, basically this says that the total costs, this is in net present value, the total cost of all of the facilities that are included in the methodology report come up to about $256 million over the next 20 years. Of that, about half of it is not impact fee eligible. And you've probably seen in the report there are many facilities that are part percentage is impact fee eligible. There's another percentage that is not. And it basically breaks about 50-50. The total amount of impact fee eligible costs is about $128 million. Then the property taxes that we have projected that will be generated by new growth and development will cover about $53 million of that, leaving about $75 million to be collected through impact fees at the maximum level. If the city were to collect or to adopt impact fees at the maximum level, the cost of all those public facilities I mentioned comes out to about 50-50, as you saw on that table. If you do not collect impact fees at all, and you just keep relying on the general fund, bond issues, whatever, it changes to a percentage where the existing tax base, folks who are here today, businesses here today, would end up paying about 56% versus 44% that would be generated through taxes from new development. The big difference, those two pie charts don't look all that different. The big difference is that with impact fees, the city would need to be collecting about devoting the proceeds of about 1.7 mils toward their share, the city's share of those impact fee projects. Without impact fees, to cover that $256 million over 20 years, they would need to be devoting 3.5 mils, which is far and away beyond, I think, the taxing capacity of the city just for those public facilities. The report includes some examples of maximum impact fees. And the one on the top, a single-family house, the maximum calculated in this report for a single-family house would be about $7,700. And that's approximately 1%. It's 1.1% of the average house price in the city that's been being constructed over the past 2 years. So it's a lot of money, but it's a very small amount when you look at the total sales price of the houses. A supermarket, an office building, they're ranging plus or minus around 1%, 1.4% versus 0.7% of the cost of building those projects on average. Fast food is much higher, almost 5% of the construction cost would be in impact fees, and that's mainly generated from all the traffic that a fast food restaurant generates compared to the small floor area. Convenience market with gas tanks would also be about 4%. So those are sort of the two high categories. Most of these are ranging around less than 1.5% on the non-residential. I'm going to skip through, Mr. Chairman, unless you want me to spend a lot of time on a bunch of tables, I'm going to kind of skip through the next bunch.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. I saw you lean forward, Mr. Chairman.
I'm good.
But these tables were just pulled out of the report. They go into a lot of detail about how these fees were calculated. Parks and Recreation, of course, was drawn primarily from the Parks and Recreation Master Plan with regard to the projects that are proposed and the levels of service that were derived from that. Same with fire protection, looking at the stations and equipment that will be needed, bearing in mind that impact fees cannot be used to replace existing equipment. Because if you've got an old fire truck, you retire it, you buy a new fire truck, you haven't changed the level of service. You still got one fire truck. So we have to look at how many more square feet need to be built in fire stations, how many more fire trucks need to be purchased to expand the level of service and serve the needs of new development. Law enforcement focuses primarily on the proposed law enforcement center. Last we heard, it was going to be about 20,000 square feet. They can put everybody together, including municipal court, into that one building. Road improvements, we pulled all of the road improvement projects from the city's budget, as well as some additional road projects from the comprehensive transportation plan, et cetera. So that's, again, there's nothing new in terms of road projects that the city doesn't already have planned. The second item is the capital improvements element. And it's called an element because it ultimately becomes a chapter in your comprehensive plan. And having gone through the comprehensive plan process, you know that the state sort of calls those chapters elements. So this was a capital improvements element that if and when the city adopts this, it's an amendment to the comprehensive plan and will therefore come all the way back through you and to the city council again through the amendment process to be adopted. On the right-hand side, I've just taken basically that same list of what was in the methodology report. I grayed out the parts that are left out of the CIE, and the one thing that's new and different is an exemption policy. And I want to spend a little time talking about why that's there and whether or not it should stay there and what we can do with regard to exemptions if the city wants, in fact, to have some. The law is very specific. In fact, I think I've got one with, well, the state law on impact fees is very specific. You can only adopt exemptions for either or both of two things. One is to encourage affordable housing in the community. So you can exempt an affordable housing project to some extent if you had that kind of an exemption. Nobody in the state of Georgia, to my knowledge, has an exemption for affordable housing, but it is available. The second is for economic development. And I would say, I haven't counted lately, roughly half of the folks who have impact fees have exemptions, the other half have no exemptions whatsoever. So it's not like you have to have them. It's strictly up to the city as to whether they even want them. Within the CIE, here's the deal. The law says if you want to have exemptions now or in the future, if you want to adopt exemptions at any time, there has to be a policy statement in the CIE. And what you see here is the statement. I think this is the one that I highlighted some words for you. This is what's in the draft CIE. If the city, and this is basically an economic development, extraordinary economic development or employment growth. If the city council says we don't want any exemptions at all, forget it, this comes out. If they say, well, we don't want any right now, but we don't want to not have the possibility at some future date with having to go all the way back and amend the CIE, would leave it in. But it's not compulsory. They don't have to actually follow through and adopt specific exemptions. In fact, when they're ready, they would adopt some criteria that they would use to decide how they're going to identify what is extraordinary economic growth and employment growth in the city. The law does not define it. They don't define what affordable housing is either. It's up to the city to decide what would be extraordinary economic growth and focus exemptions on that. Now there's some downsides to having exemptions, and that is however much money you exempt someone from having to pay as an impact fee, the city has to make that money up from something other than impact fees. The whole idea is they're granting an exemption because there's a public purpose involved. There's something more important about having business XYZ than just getting impact fees. So they've waived or exempted a certain portion of the impact fees, maybe 100%, because it's more valuable to have the business. But that means that the public, because it's in the public interest, the public has to pay through their taxes for the difference. So that's a major downside. Various cities and counties that do have exemptions for economic development, they use them in various and sundry ways. You might look at, what is a business going to produce in terms of new jobs? Are they managerial and professional jobs, or are they regular employees? Is the average pay scale above or below the statewide average? What's the investment going into the new development, and what would that mean to your tax base? That kind of thing. Others have used this exemption to focus development in certain areas. City of Jefferson, for instance, grants an exemption if you're doing non-residential development in their downtown or historic area. Fayetteville did the same thing, but they changed and did away with exemptions entirely. So there are a lot of different ways that the city could use exemptions if they wanted to, but I'm not recommending that you do. I'm not recommending that you don't. This is just a possibility if anybody actually, if the city wants to do it. I think something that may be more valuable to you is credits. And basically a credit is a reduction in an impact fee for very, very specific reasons. And the bottom line is if a development or a developer is going to do something that will in fact reduce the cost of those public facilities to the city, then you can give that as a credit. And we'll get to an example of that in a minute. But for instance, I know you're looking at conservation subdivisions. This is not about conservation subdivisions. It could be, it might be, but basically, you could look at the possibility of granting a credit if someone dedicates a conservation easement to the city such that the city does not have to spend its own money to buy those acres. So you've reduced the cost to the city by accepting that as a no-cost dedication, because we've reduced the number of acres the city actually has to go acquire themselves. Another possibility is to look at a credit for larger than average lots. And I know the city wants to encourage large lot development. And this is why it's important that we're looking at a build-out scenario for the city. Basically, we've said, okay, the city can only accommodate 10,000 new housing units over the next 20 years. And at that point, you're full. But those calculations assume an average lot size, gross lot size, including roads, et cetera, of 1.5 acres per housing unit. If someone wants to build larger lots, that means there's less land for other houses to be built on at 1.5 acres. So in essence, you're reducing the demand on the city to provide those public facilities, because ultimately you'll be serving fewer houses. We have not calculated any credit for that. It's going to be very complicated to look at, but I know that there are ways that we could look at it and try to help the city with that goal. And here's the good part: you don't have to pay anything back, because in a credit calculation, what you're really doing is calculating what the true impact of that development is. So there's nothing left on the table that the city has to come back and increase the impact fee funds in the process. I did a quick example of how a credit might be calculated for conservation easements. Do not take any of these numbers as seriously, and this is not a proposal, but I wanted to show you how one might go about calculating such a credit. And in my example, I have an owner dedicating 11.82 acres. You will see in a moment why I use such a strange number. But the idea is an owner of some land wants to dedicate to the city 11.82 acres in a conservation easement. And the city's conservation plan, as you well know, has the number of acres that they wish to acquire, either in fee simple or in easements. And the gross value to the city of that is about $12,200 per acre. That's that net present value calculation of how much the city on average would be paying for a conservation easement that they just want to acquire, they want to purchase. So my 11.82 acres results in a total value to the city of $144,000 that they, in essence, don't have to spend in acquiring 11.82 acres somewhere else.
Hey, Bill?
Yes.
Real quick, how much longer do you think you're going to be?
This is the next to the last.
Great.
I
was curious because we have a lot of public comment for the
Yeah.
conservation, so I was curious.
Sure.
All right.
Bottom line here, we use the level of service. Now, this is assuming that everything's been adopted at the maximum level. But the level of service for conservation easements is 0.1182 acres per dwelling unit. So magic of all magic acts, that means that the 11.82 acres that are being donated would cover 100 houses. And so the value of the credit comes out to $1,400 and some odd dollars. You subtract that from the impact fee itself for Parks and Recreation, and that's the reduction you get for those 100 houses. Lastly, but not leastly, coming up, the City Council is going to have a work session, basically listening to me rattle on and on, just like tonight, about the methodology report and the CIE. We will be holding a public hearing July the 20th. City Council will have a public hearing on the CIE, not the methodology report, but the CIE. And following that public hearing, they can transmit the CIE to ARC to start the regional and state review. We think, assuming that this all keeps going as scheduled, we'll be working on the impact fee ordinance in August. The advisory committee will get back together and advise us on the ordinance. And bear in mind, the ordinance includes the impact fee schedule. What's the city really going to adopt with regard to impact fees? And following that, at a to-be-announced date, the city could adopt the CIE, adopt the ordinance, and be in the impact fee business if they cared to.
We need public comment, Robin, on this?
I don't have any, but
Okay.
does anybody have any public comment?
I do. I filled one out.
Okay, sorry. Come on up, Mr. Recook.
Good evening. My name is Walter Recook. I live at 615 Scarlet Oak Trail in Milton, Georgia. I believe impact fees have a place, and I think that the consultant's trying to do a good job. I think one of the problems in creating an impact fee is staff gets a little bit overzealous. This is a situation in which the staff is told, come up with a list of anything you could think of that the city could need in the next 20 or 30 years. So they come up with something that could equal $150 million and say, okay, well, then we're going to have to distribute that amongst all the folks that could potentially be moving into the city. And therefore, that's how we're going to come up with these impact fees. I think we have to understand that an impact fees not to be used to increase the level of service, nor for that matter to increase where we don't have existing services. You know, we're looking at a situation where now we have about 0.92 miles of trail system, and right now they're looking at potentially creating over 90 miles of trail system. I'm not saying that's not a good idea. I'm just saying that if you're having a certain proportion of growth, why are you putting it all on the burden of the people that are moving here? And I think what I'm trying to say to you, the devil's in the details. The devil is in how are you distributing all of this. Same thing with the Parks Department. Our Parks Department is shared with Alpharetta, where some of the needs in our Parks Department are also the needs of some of in Alpharetta. In addition, we use some of Alpharetta's facilities. So let's be aware of how we're also being impacted. And I'm not saying that that's not to be understood, but it's not mentioned in the report. Again, I'm a believer that bond referendums are the biggest and best way to develop projects. When you wait for an impact fee to get $7,000 for all these houses being developed, you're not going to buy a $300,000 fire truck by waiting till you collect $7,000 from households as they move in. When you need that fire truck, you need to buy that fire truck. If you need to build a fire station, you need to go ahead and build it. The city doesn't even be waiting on impact fees. I'm not saying it doesn't have a place, but at the same time, bond referendums are your best way to do capital improvements projects. And also, it's a way to get public involved in deciding how major projects are going to be spent in the city. Whether we need a fire station, a park, a capital improvement project for a road, those are all impacts. Many of our road projects are also impacted by the people that drive into our community. Some of our fire needs are also impacted by those people that drive into our community. So impact is not just for the people that live here or work here, or for that matter, work here. It's also the people who drive through here. Thank you for your time. Appreciate all your work on the commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the consultant? Oh, sure? Okay.
Do a comment?
Go for it. Yep.
Okay, sorry. I'm Kathy Johnson. I live at 385 Taylor Glanton Drive in Milton. I'm on the advisory committee for the impact fee advisory committee, and I just wanted to say I've been to all the meetings, and what the impact fee is, as you see, it's the fair share of the new people moving in. It's not that they will have to pay for all these services. The people that still live here will pay for that through their taxes, and they have been all the years they've been here. It's a fair share thing, so there's no extra burden on the new people. And I did want to note that almost every community around this area has impact fees except for Johns Creek. Roswell has them. Alpharetta has them, Cherokee County has them, Sandy Springs has them. Everybody has it except for Milton right now. So the developers right now that are developing in the houses right now and that have been getting sort of a little windfall because they don't have to pay for that impact fee. And anywhere else right around here, they are paying that impact fee. And Alpharetta is actually redoing their impact fee right now also. So we're the only community in the area that's not doing that right now. And every time a house is built right now in Milton, we are losing $7,700. So I think it's a great idea. I think we should have done it a long time ago. And I also think that it should be at the maximum. And it's and with the price of houses in Milton, it really is a small amount. $7,000 compared to $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 up to $1 million houses. It's really a small amount for people buying the houses. So I just want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment, Robin?
I don't have any more cards for
All
it.
right, that'll close public comment. Any questions for? Shoot.
Mr. Chairman, if what Walter was saying is very true. The last impact fee is collected in the last year that the last house is built. Any impact fee program requires a financing element to it. That's not within the impact fee. I can tell you how much the impact fee can be, but whether bonds are necessary or not will be up to the city to figure out how to actually finance these. Without impact fees, you will finance 100% of $255 million. Secondly, just a quick comment. There is nothing in this report that the consultant dreamed up and stuck in here. Everything in this report is taken from adopted plans of the city, your capital budget, your 10-year capital budget. Everything is a project that's already planned to be built. You may have bitten off more than you can chew, but I didn't dream up anything and stick it in here just for the heck of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I've got a question for you. First of all, I've been on the committee, the impact fee committee, working along with the consultants along the way with Kathy, and I echo her sentiments exactly on what we've learned in the process. It's been an eye opener on what is included, how these things are calculated, and literally what I feel we are giving away. You, all of us are paying for these things, whether or not it's assessed to a newcomer or an oldcomer. This stuff is getting paid for. And right now, the current taxpayers of Milton, if it's getting bought, you're paying for it. And so this is not a fairness type of issue. This is let's deal with the facts like we've been dealing with some of these other things, and we need to figure out part of this process is showing us exactly where these costs are and where they lay, and how we're going to figure out a way to utilize this program in a proper and fair way. My question is this. As we move forward with this, I know we've had several different things going on in the city with some of our development, and we've currently got a moratorium on this. I know that currently this is scheduled, our impact fee program is scheduled to be completed before the end of the year, and we've got a schedule, but who knows exactly how that's going to play out. This may be something for the city of attorney, so please let me know if this is for him or not. But my question is it possible to adopt or write some type of information into our ordinance to where, knowing that we presume to be prepared to adopt an impact fee ordinance, knowing that we're going to do that, if we were to say today, release our moratorium, can we assess a fee to be named later, a placeholder? Can we assess a limited fee based on the fact that we are fairly certain we're going to do it later, so that we don't have to play catch up? And I know there's a lot to this question, but there is a lot to this question. And I know we collect these fees generally when it's a permitting type of issue, not everything up front. So can you help me at all with any of that?
Yes. On the one hand, the state impact fee law says you cannot charge any fee for capital improvements unless you do it with an impact fee program adopted under the state law. So you can't kind of have a player to be announced tomorrow, kind of approach. You have to actually adopt the CIE and an ordinance before you can collect the fees at all. The ordinance, however, can have a date at which it becomes effective. If you wanted to delay, so you adopt the ordinance, everybody knows what the fees are going to be, but the effective date may be at a future point that people can get used to the idea or could anticipate what the fees would be after that date.
So am I hearing you say that the ordinance can adopt something sooner than you're finished, and with
No.
the fee? So it
No,
has to be
the
later.
ordinance has
It
to
can't
be after
Okay.
you approve that CIE. That's your enabler to adopt an ordinance. We can do it both at the same night, but we can't do the ordinance earlier. Also, and I'll just throw this in also, the ordinance could have a schedule that for the first number of months, the fee schedule will be 50% of the fees, and then go to 75, and then go to 100.
And then ramp
There are a
it till-
lot of ways that you can handle introducing the fee into the process.
Got it.
And I'm going to add one more thing to it. The fee is associated with the issuance of a building permit. So anybody who's already out there building a subdivision, they have a land development permit, they can proceed, but the first building permit after the ordinance goes into effect, that one has to pay the impact fee. Anything built up to that point will be grandfathered, and there'll be no retroactive fee on those developments. That's probably more answer than you asked.
No, it isn't. It isn't, because I've been thinking about it, and we do have a log jam, and it's just, and it's been problematic, both from a pressure standpoint and a builder standpoint and a community standpoint. So it is a problem, and we're going to have to wrestle with it, deal with it. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, just for Robin. Robin, Noel is our representative from the Planning Commission, and we heard Kathy comment tonight that she's a part of the committee also.
Yes,
Who
and
else?
Michelle has a better idea of who all the
Who else is on
members
the
are.
committee?
It's one from each committee, right?
10 total?
One from BZA, one from DRB, one from Parks and Rec.
Yes, we have 10 folks on the committee, and 5 are from the development community.
I look at it. It's on the
And
website,
we looked at all the citizen groups that we have, and we sort of drew from there the folks who volunteered from the MGG, Ms. Kathy, and Parks and
MGG
Rec.
is a part of it also.
Well, yes, Kathy's representing MGG. So
Oh,
we
all right.
looked at all of our committees and folks who volunteered.
Great.
And then some of the usual people that,
Plus the development community.
yes, exactly.
And it really was a more of a a monitoring role, because we weren't having input to what was included or what was going to be done, or at each stage, the consultant really kept us informed and trained us along the way, so we just know what was happening with the process, and it's interesting.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other discussion on that? All right, Robin, before we go on to the next one, can I get a 2-minute recess for a restroom break?
Sure.
Can I get a motion for that to be formal?
So moved.
All right. Y'all good? All right.
Thank you, sir.
Did your mom tell you to come before you?
Yes, she did. I thought you've done a good job so far. I mean, with what we learned in that process.
Now, in hindsight, like you said, it's like, how can we ever?
It's just stupid. I mean,
Anybody else who has cards can bring them up to me.
It's like, no, we got your cover charge. Come on in. There's an incentive to bill right now.
Because you can save $7,000. But as you know,
I'm like, what are we doing?
I think we should adopt it where you say you can ramp up, we should ramp down. We should charge 200%.
Yeah,
and you max down when you get closer to build out.
You can max and you cannot max. And I've looked into it. I've talked to the man. And I'm like, how can we implement? I mean, it's incumbent.
Well, the good news is,
Yeah, exactly. That's why I was looking at the schedule going, you know what, it needs to be any way to speed it up.
Yeah. And like adopt it at 9 and then back it down when we find out it's 8.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to
No,
me.
my expectation would be it would just go up.
Exactly.
I mean, you're going to add more projects. Whoever cuts back on that sort of stuff, you're going to add more projects. You're going to want more parks. You're going to want more fire. You're going to want more police. You're going to want more roads. I mean,
We are getting, and it's not, I'm in the construction business. This is not a fee that the developers are going to pay. This is
No,
a
it's
pass to the new guy.
well, and it's
so
not
my house
housing.
is
Housing,
$800,000 will be.
That just became
Honey, I bought a couch for $8,000.
housing's not the big part of it. It's that other stuff that's like $1 million for a shopping center.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, the salvation for me on this, like, okay, the impact fees are for straight housing, they're not going to be anything.
Yeah, it's not going to drop in the bucket.
It's not going to change the complexion of development. It's not going to stop development as we know on the residential side.
Which is too bad. It's not a leverage point to it.
No, it's not.
It's not a
However,
leverage
the
point.
leverage point is the credit part.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's almost, it's just so little bit of
Yeah, I
money.
told us. Yeah, we're
It's
not
not big enough to where it's going to have leverage.
It's a rounding error.
Not this, Rock. I thought we were before the meeting.
Then we could go, wow, now you got something to leverage.
We're going to vote on it in
They do
August.
double pane instead of triple pane.
That's what Robin
They do. They skip a radiant barrier on the roof. I mean, there's ways for them to cut $7,000 out of the cost of the house, even if they don't pass it.
Again, it's not a cost of the
No,
building.
it's not.
It's just like going to be a line that you're closing, and here's the fee for this, and here's the fee for termite, and here's the fee for your survey.
If we don't get caught last time, I was just going to have
But
public comment, not this whole.
we are paying
Okay.
this fee for everybody now. We're just $8,000. Welcome to Milton. This is it's crazy town.
That's what
But
they were saying.
this is the pass-through.
So that's what it was. So I'm going to find out how many cards you got and say each person
They're
gets
going to put it on the closing statement, and we've already.
All right, here it
It'll
comes.
be part of your line item. That's how we've talked to some people about how they do it in those other places. It just says 700,000.
Hey, Robin,
Survey was
are we good?
And your closing fee was this.
Okay.
And real estate was
Okay.
this, and there it is.
But the builder,
there's your taxes on this.
but the builder paid it whenever they asked for their
They
building
get their
permit.
building permit.
And then they write a check for $7,700.
That's what we were
That's what I was thinking about. Like, oh,
Then they recoup it at the closing.
It's a line.
I told Fred, I guess
It's a fee. It is
Yes,
a
it is a
fee.
fee. Well, yeah.
It's like a tax or a fee or a dock stamp.
Buy a house.
Yeah, it's got to be through.
we good? All right, I'm gonna call.
It's a tax.
I'm gonna call this meeting back to order.
I just never seen all the tax.
Are we good? All right, Don. All
Tries out like points or you get points.
right, call the next item, Robin.
Okay.
Are we done?
Are we done?
Are we there yet?
Okay, the next item is the Conservation Subdivision Ordinance, Chapter 50 of the City Code, and presented by Mr. Don Broussard.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, thank you. My name is Don Broussard. I'm with Town Planning and Design, also in Atlanta. I'm with my colleague Bruce McGregor. I really want to thank you for allowing Bill Ross to be my opening act. Bill was one of my first bosses and to this day remains one of my best bosses. He and I worked together at Gwinnett County's Development Department in the mid-1980s, and he is the state, without a doubt, the expert in the state of Georgia on impact fees.
Yeah, he's been good.
Sounds like it.
The ordinance before you all tonight is a draft of the conservation subdivision ordinance. To this date, we have had 9 meetings with the public on the issue of conservation subdivision in varying details. And you all, 3 of those have been under the auspices of this planning commission. And I think we as consultants have learned a lot. I believe you all have acknowledged that you all benefited from some of these meetings. Let me do a quick run through of how our conservation subdivision works. To any of you all who may be new, there's a conservation subdivision. Everyone else is getting tired of seeing that diagram. It is a golf course subdivision without a golf course. The golf course is replaced by some form of green space, either in agriculture or in forest, or put to some other passive or perhaps active recreation use. That's conservation design in a nutshell. And the other part of that formula, of course, is the green space is collected because you've downsized the lots below their normal zoning size. The ordinance draft that you all have been given remains an ordinance that has a 60% green space requirement, and that green space, there are standards about how that green space is to be allocated and its dimensions and so forth, and those are in the ordinance, and we can go into that. The important features of the ordinance: conservation subdivision is an alternative and an option in all residential single-family districts, and I think I included wording that said even in the two-family district, if that is what a developer and landowner wish to invoke. However, within the AG1 agricultural zoning district, conservation subdivisions are the preferred method of land division, and the conventional subdivision is not preferred and would require a special use permit and a public hearing before the mayor and council. The other key point: the yield plans are based on zoning standards, the zoning dimensions that are in the City of Milton zoning ordinance. In AG1, that is a minimum acreage of 1 acre. The significance of this, and it's a controversy you're going to hear about if you haven't heard about it already, is that in the design of a yield plan, which would be the document that sets the base density of the conservation subdivision, compliance with Fulton County septic tank rules is not required. We're asking the developer to comply with Fulton County's. We're asking the developer to comply with the City of Milton's zoning ordinance, which is the regulation that sets density under your comprehensive plan. The minimum lot size is, and I'll have more about that in a second. Minimum lot size has been increased from previous drafts from 6,000 square feet to 8,000 square feet. A 10% bonus lot provision is also included in this draft based on a number of specifically defined conditions. that the Planning Commission may cite as grounds for a 10% bonus. There is a table in the zoning in the draft subdivision regs that outlines the numeric range for these for this 10% bonus. The other critical point: buffers. All existing zoning buffers remain in effect. The AG1 buffers remain in effect. This Planning Commission, and at the recommendation of the Community Development Director, has authority to increase those buffers wherever they are needed, particularly if houses on small lots on the subdivision side would be proposed to join or be near existing AG1 dwellings and lots that are off-site. Therefore, a buffer would be required, and an enhanced buffer at that point. So there was a deliberate decision to offer some flexibility and discretion in the imposition of increased buffers. But let me repeat, all existing zoning buffers required, and that includes the rural viewshed buffer, remains in effect and would be implemented in the conservation subdivision. That's what a 40-foot buffer looks like in the front yard of a house in a conservation subdivision. There's one. In fact, there are 3 houses in that photo. There's a natural buffer there, and that is, I'm standing in a public street looking into the 3 houses there. 40-foot buffer is what is in your AG1 zoning district. So that's the kind of buffer that would automatically be imposed. If there were facts or conditions brought to the attention of the development director, or brought to your attention in the course of a public hearing by the public, you all would have discretion to increase the depth of that buffer. Now, why is all this aimed at AG1? That's because AG1 is an agricultural zone, and your zoning ordinance defines it that way. There it is, right there. Those are some of the other zoning categories in the Milton Zoning Code. The ones with yellow that on the screen don't look very good. That yellow, that's AG1, and it's deemed agriculture. It's not shown as single family. Of course, you look at the AG1 code, and I have that here. You look at it, residential is a listed use, without a doubt. But it is interesting that in this table, where everything is listed as single family, AG1 is the one zoning district that's clearly designated differently. It's agriculture. It should be treated like agriculture in the subdivision process. And nothing will protect the agricultural, rural character of these tracts of remaining land. Nothing will protect it and protect the rural appearance and the rural and agricultural fact better than conservation subdivision regulation. The required plans. There's a long list of them. 5 of those are required. 2 of them are basically optional. The context map just shows the surrounding area. The existing resources map shows in detail the existing conditions that are on the site. Floodplains, rock outcrops, steep slopes, any historic resources, any old buildings, any existing structures like fences or walls, things that might have value in the course of designing the subdivision. The yield plan, as I mentioned earlier, is the key document where your plan is the density of the subdivision is basically set on the baseline of that document, and it's essentially a conventional subdivision plat in which every lot must meet the full AG1 standards for setbacks, for lot area, for lot width, for frontage on a street, and the streets are drawn in realistic locations. It is by all standards would be a buildable subdivision were it, for example, on public sewer. There would be no question it would be buildable. Were it on public sewer, every lot in it would be buildable. The And again, the reasoning behind the exemption for Fulton County health regulations is that in the course of designing the actual concept plan, the actual concept plan that would be the regulating document, none of these lots are going to have on-site septic on them. Forcing a developer to engineer the site so that it meets the theory that it would have a septic on it, in my opinion, creates a weakness in the ordinance that is something I don't believe we should be doing. The ordinance, it's not justifiable as a reasonable regulation if no on-site septic system is going to be built on that lot. I would argue that it's much more effective for the City of Milton to require the developer and his engineers to expend their efforts and resources engineering the wastewater system that will be built. And that would be a community wastewater system in most cases. It would be a community wastewater system. Sample elevation drawing. This was a suggestion that came out of our public meetings. Show the public, show neighbors what the proposed conservation subdivision will look like. Draw an elevation of, as viewed from the surroundings. This is not the purpose of this is not to show what it looks like internally necessarily. It's to show how it looks on the public roads approaching the conservation subdivision. This should give the you decision makers a better view as to the design of the subdivision, and it should reassure neighbors that they are going to get an appropriately designed conservation subdivision. We've strengthened the site visit requirement. That site visit, all relevant city staff are eligible to attend, including the city arborist, public works, community development, anybody who's needed, anybody who's relevant to the approval process. 3 planning commissioners are allowed. Why 3? Well, that's the limit set by Georgia Open Meetings requirements for any kind of unofficial meeting. And I might also add, I checked the Athens-Clarke County Conservation Subdivision Code, and this same standard is in there. So 3 planning commissioners get to come to the site and tour the site with the developer, his engineers and landscape architects. And as well, the ordinance mentions adjoining neighbors can be invited. It doesn't mandate that because that's up to the discretion of the landowner and the developer. But the ordinance encourages that. And I think we all know it would sometimes behoove the developer to invite his abutting neighbors to attend the site visit planning session before this thing gets designed in any kind of hard fashion. And again, the code clearly recites that no official actions can be taken at this. This is the key part, in my view, in the in this conservation subdivision design process that allows the Planning Commission the ability to see the site and then carry that knowledge back to the public hearing that you all would be holding. There again, yield plan. And again, one more argument about why septic and county health standards really don't make sense. There's a list of county health standards of Fulton County and our neighboring counties. These standards are all over the map. There's no consistency. If you lived in Gwinnett County, what's the standard there? 25,500. If you're in Forsyth County, it's 25,500. Apparently, soils get dramatically better at the county line when you cross from Fulton into Forsyth County. So if we're not actually going to have on-site septic system on lots, why force this high bar and pretend that we're going to make the lot comply with that. It just does not make sense. Wastewater treatment then becomes a critical issue, and of course, as you know, we've had people from Georgia EPD appear at our meetings. Community waste systems are going to be critical for this because the lots are going to be downsized. They're approved by Georgia EPD. They can be owned and operated by private utility companies that are in this business. They can be owned by homeowner associations, or homeowner association can be the trustee. The City of Milton could be the trustee. Fulton County's Water and Sewer Department could be a trustee. There are lots of options there. The key is that a Georgia licensed operator is operating that system and maintaining it. The key is that a professional engineer registered in the state of Georgia is going to design that system. No, professional engineers are not designing septic systems. That's not going on right now. You're getting a higher level of technology and engineering skill when you get a community waste system. And by the way, this ordinance does not introduce community wastewater systems into the City of Milton. They're here now. The Publix on Birmingham Highway has a community waste system with a drip irrigation land dispersal system. Your code right now allows and acknowledges community wastewater systems as a viable, permitted waste system for subdivisions right now. There it is in Section 50-159. Lots not served by a public sewer or by community sanitary sewerage system and public water shall meet the dimension and area requirements of the Department of Health. Meaning, if you don't have those systems and you're using an on-site septic system and you have a water well, you will meet Fulton County Health Department standards. That is the rule there. But again, with community waste system or a public sewer access, you don't have to do that. So the argument that the conservation subdivision is going to introduce community waste systems into this community is just false. Here's what a plan looks like. By the way, there's the quote, sorry. Here's what a subdivision plat looks like for a conservation subdivision. And this area over here is the waste system. That's one facility right there. That's the drip field. It's the drain land application field. Here's a line that's distributing and collecting effluent from these lots here.
Hey, Don, can you kind of since we can't see that, give me a ballpark on where?
Oh, yeah, that's right. You can't see my pointer. The big curved area up at the top right is a residential area. The dark building out to the bottom left or mid left of the.
Got it.
That's the part of the waste system there.
Okay.
And there's a little square below that. That's also part of the waste system.
Okay.
And the curving line is a line serving that system. The photograph below, again, that's one of the buildings that's housing the pump system and is part of the wastewater plant.
And where is this subdivision located?
This one is in South Fulton County. It's Serenity.
Is that the one 2,000 acres?
The next comment is what are conservation subdivisions going to do for this city? Why do we need them? Why use this tool? Well, if you look at the conservation plan that the city adopted and had done in 2014, here's the statement in that plan. Well, where's the statement? There it is. Under the conservation, if the recent level of residential development in Milton continues over the next 16 years, new residential development would use up about 5,000 acres. I looked at the more detailed set of numbers he had and came up with a range that comes right in that area. If we're looking under conservation subdivision in the next 15 years, if you were to adopt this ordinance and every subdivision would in AG 1 would use the 60% standard, the city of Milton would gain between 2,000 and 4,000 acres of green space, again, over the next 15 years. The 2,000 acres is based on 150 units a year being approved. 150 units is the low end. The high end is 300 units. And those are conservative numbers. You all have had over permits issued in the over 400 permits a year in some of the recent years coming out of the recession. But taking a conservative estimate, between 150 to 300 AG1 units, you're looking at 2,000 to 4,000 acres of green space at zero cost to the taxpayers of the city of Milton. So, why do we need this? By the way, there's the map. This is a map of undeveloped land and vacant land in the city of Milton. This is a current map. And it, hang on, let me get to my, the figures there, again, confirm about 4,000 to 5,000 units, 4,000 to 5,000 acres of undeveloped land currently existing in the city. And the reason for that 4,000, 5,000, if you discount the smallest range of those, some of these are below 10-acre tracts. So you kind of need to hold those out. Because, again, the ordinance exempts any subdivision of 5 acres or less from conservation subdivision. It's a minor subdivision. It also exempts any subdivision of land where all the lots resulting are 5 acres or greater. So, in other words, if you own 50 acres and you need to sell 10, and you can split that off. You're not subject to conservation subdivision. That's a lot split. You get to do that. So the question is, why go through all this trouble? Well, that's why. As I said, this is Serenbe. Who wouldn't want 400 acres with 70% green space? Who wouldn't want the subdivision?
Hey, excuse me, sir. We're not going to have that in here, okay? No, we're not going to have that. We aren't going to have that. No, we're not. Go on, Don.
Who would not want this kind of quality of housing in the $500,000 and $600,000 and $700,000 range that truly does have a rural appearance, that truly does have the kinds of mix of old and new that I believe your comprehensive plan states as a goal of the community, and that surely the community has expressed in its meetings with us over the last 7 months. This should not be the only quality development in Fulton County. Milton could have a half dozen of these, maybe not that large, but certainly in that quality range. Conservation subdivision ordinances are the best way to achieve that. Thank you. That finishes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer questions from you all,
right.
or from the public.
How many public comment cards do we have, Robin?
I have 11 public comment cards, and I have about 3 to read into the record additionally. So.
Okay. Let's do the list of commissioners. Opposed? Let's just do, we'll do 3 minutes per, well, can we limit it? Can you do the timer of 3 minutes per speaker? Can we do that? Just because I don't want to give 10 minutes and then someone takes 8 minutes. And,
Right.
You know what I mean? Okay.
Yeah, can you guys close that door so I can just work on that one too? So I can do the counter.
I'm good with that.
Yeah. Can we get all the calls?
Some people.
Okay. So, and I believe, Chairman, that you don't want to do for or against, it'll just be a running commentary, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So the first,
The individual speaking can state whether they're.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, they
the
can, but we're
individual
not going to
speaker.
divide them. Into
Right,
two.
because that'll be like what would happen.
And then again, if anybody's come into the audience and needs to submit a card, please feel free to come up and place it on
How many do you have to read into the record?
11, and then 3 letters have come through.
Let's go ahead and read the letters. Let's
Okay.
go ahead and just do that real
Yeah.
quick. Thanks.
Sorry.
We're going to stop you at 3 minutes.
Yeah, unless it's longer than 3 minutes.
Yeah. Some of them are really short, and one's a little bit longer. Okay. This is from Jim and Roshanak Dotson. We are proud residents of the city of Milton. We moved to this part of the metro area 20 years ago for its rolling hills, quiet natural landscapes, equestrian atmosphere, and privacy. Milton became one of the best places to live, and we would hate to see that change. We are already experiencing more and more traffic, reduction in greenbelt areas, woods, and nature areas. People are already starting to sell their homes and move from the area due to recent changes and additional developments. Unfortunately, we cannot make the meeting this evening, but would like to be heard and represented. Please do not allow this CSO to move forward as proposed. We feel it would be a detriment to the future of Milton. Thank you for your consideration. Best regards. The next letter is from Jim Costello. I do not have an address on that one. The Conservation Subdivision Ordinance proposal is meant to serve one constituency, those who want a whole lot of houses on a little bit of land. Offering undefined green space in exchange for subdividing 1 acre lots is a sleeves out of the vest proposal. Upon detailed review, no business person on this list would buy what this is selling. It is blatantly self-serving for those who want rampant development. Have you driven through Swanee or Johns Creek lately? If you haven't, I urge you to do so. The drive will enable one to see the effects of uncontrolled development which has occurred because those in the know knew how to push through absurd legislation like the CSO proposal. My family and I relocated to Milton 3 months before it officially became a city. Our primary motivation was to live in a beautiful, safe, peaceful, and wholesome area. My wife lived in Swanee and I lived in Roswell when we married. It took little research and debate to decide where we wanted to live and where we did not want to live. The out-of-control development east of Georgia 400 has taken the joy and value out of living in that particular area. We cannot let this happen here. Can you not see a future in which Hopewell, Freemanville, and Birmingham Highway all become fast food freeways? Some may argue that such a vision is irrelevant when the proposed CSO addresses lot density only. However, a legislative body that acts favorably upon such a CSO proposal could certainly not be trusted to make intelligent and visionary decisions in the months and years ahead when other zoning changes are requested. The CSO proposal is counter to almost every citizen's cultural stance within Milton. Mayor, Planning Commission members, City Council members, and good citizens of Milton, please say no to the CSO proposal. Put the needs, wants, and values of the citizen voters ahead of those wanting a lot of houses on a little land. Respectfully, Jim Costello, White Columns residents. The next comment is from Ann Parkinson. Says, I want to express my concerns over the draft CSO being considered by the Planning Commission this evening. I will plan to attend the meeting, but in case I'm unable, I want to voice the significant concerns. I apologize. Is Ms. Parkinson here? Okay. I will continue reading. Point 1, 8,000 square foot lots will significantly change the feel of an already changing face of Milton and add even further to its traffic nightmare. I've lived in Triple Crown for 8 years and am generally 4 to 5 cars deep in trying to take a left turn out of Birmingham Highway in the morning or afternoon. When you are able to take your turn at heading south out of the subdivision, honestly, it is a dangerous maneuver. There are simply no adequate brakes in traffic to make the southbound turn, and while the new roundabout has led to greater efficiency, this efficiency has unfortunately led to greater speed on its north side. With many more novice teen drivers every day trying to take this turn, it is a matter of time before there is a serious accident. More density and more traffic should be a significant concern for everyone in Milton. Point 2, allowing for green spaces to not truly be for conservation, i.e. stormwater management, wastewater treatment, or active recreation areas should not be defined as attributing to conservation. They are not. Point 3, 10 to 20-foot setbacks on the cottage lots, again, will add significantly to the density, traffic, and congestion that exists today and to Milton in the future. Although there is no guarantee that the developers will choose a smaller lot size, it has been very clear over the last year or two that developers currently building in Milton are not concerned with traffic, congestion, or conservation. I have witnessed acres and acres of forest completely decimated in days and am watching many subdivisions full of homes with a single entranceway being built on roads that cannot handle its existing traffic patterns and are devoid of alternate options. Just drive south on Birmingham Highway, east on Providence or Mid-Broadwell, or south on Freemanville Road at 7 a.m. on a weekday morning if you are unsure. The next point is the density bonus lots are a scary incentive. Please see my comments above related to existing traffic and congestion in Milton, the current development taking place, residential development today in Milton is about building the maximum number of homes allowed to make the maximum amount of money. This is a business. This will not mysteriously change with the approval of this ordinance. And last point, the purpose of the Article 5 is to ensure a preservation of green space and to promote and protect the rural character of Milton. Based on these concerns, I do not see how this is accomplished in this draft CSO. Please do not approve it. Unintended consequences in government decisions are always a concern, but in this case, the consequences are not a mystery or something we cannot foresee. Thank you, and please ask the city clerk to read this into the official record. Okay, so you want me to continue on with the public comment cards that are here?
Oh, sure.
Okay. The next speaker is Thomas McMullen.
Good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Thomas McMullen. I live at 1710 Windsor Cove, Milton. That's the Highland Manor subdivision off Birmingham Road. I've been through this ordinance 2 or 3 times, and it's very hard. It's easy to get the concept that 60% of the land will be preservation, conservation. But it's very hard to get a handle on what the housing is going to be like. It's very hard to envision what the housing is going to be like, and you can only conclude after reading through it that that what's left for the housing is going to create a lot of density and bad-looking plans. So some areas of suggestions, I think that should be revisited by the consultant, would be to eliminate the cottage lots altogether. You know, the 6,000 foot, 8,000 foot, well, it's not, that's gone. The 8,000 to 16,000 foot lot is really considered like a city postage stamp lot. And he's talking about $700,000 homes. I mean, really, realistically, no $700,000 home is going to be built on a postage stamp lot. Secondly, I think the bonus and what really, really sticks out here as being a kind of careless drafting is the drafting on the bonus lots. Now, these bonus lots give the builder an entitlement that really he doesn't have to do very much. It's very undefined in the ordinance what the builder has to do to get a bonus lot. And I think that how this is going to develop is that the builder will almost always qualify for bonus lots, which will increase density. Theoretically, the builder could come in and say, I qualify for 4 bonus lots, and then make them all 8,000 square foot lots. And I mean, is that something that's consistent with the kind of building that we see, you know, as we were mentioning in Freemansville and Birmingham Highway? So I think bonus lots should all be eliminated also. And the builder should be given what he or she needs to do to get a permit, and then let it up to them to qualify for a permit, and not have this nebulous bonus lot situation that's really going to end up just creating a lot more density in this 40% of land that's left. The next thing is that cul-de-sacs, the way I read this is that cul-de-sacs are, if not discouraged, they're eliminated. This is a very valuable planning tool that should the Planning Commission should not eliminate, because
It's been 3 minutes, sir.
cul-de-sacs provide privacy, create value, slow down traffic, and so the last thing is.
We're going to have,
Want me to sit down?
no, yes, sir. We're going to cut you off just because we got 11 people.
Yeah, I
Everyone-
understand. But
Okay.
I got my points in. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, the next speaker is Abby Taylor.
Thank you, members of the commission. My name is Abby Taylor. I live on 115 Kildernon Court in the Enniskerry neighborhood. I appreciate the effort to think out of the box to better manage the inevitable growth in North Fulton, but this specific ordinance has too many disadvantages that will most surely erode our quality of life and reduce property values. The cottage lots and traditional lots do not fit within the desired character of our community. Milton is a unique community noted for the large lots, farm, and natural areas. Milton has a reputation as a small town, rural atmosphere with the advantages of the big city. The property values in Milton have generally withstood the recession and continue to climb because of the unique proximity to the highly desired Alpharetta subdivision area and the commutable location to Alpharetta, Marietta, and other areas. While efforts have been made in this initiative to improve green space in future subdivisions, the trade-off for higher density will surely wipe away this small town rural feel and make this area not so unique anymore and less desirable. Truthfully, there are so many other places in North Fulton and around Alpharetta that already have dense housing. How many places in North Fulton are like Milton? Very few. Very precious. This is our differentiator. We cannot lose this value. The other point I wanted to make was on the density bonuses, and I have to agree that it's a great idea to offer some incentive. However, there is nothing written in there that the developer is doing anything more than playing by the standard rules to get the incentive bonus. The developer should offer something to the community as a whole, broad scale. Such as adding to the infrastructure or something to the community as a whole. Thank you. I do appreciate your efforts. Thank you very much, everyone, including the consultant, for your work.
Thank you.
Okay, the next card I have is the speaker's asked me to read her comment into the record. Her name is Sandra Fairs, 2065 Country Ridge Road. She states, members, if this were your neighborhood and you put your life savings into a home area that has R1 and low-density housing, would you, 1, vote yes for this? 2, would you want your home value diminished? 3, would you want to be responsible for my family's difference in appraised value of my house? And 4, would you personally pay us? Secondly, I would also like to request that the fire station on Thompson Road use its low decibel sirens.
Good for her. Good for her.
Okay. The next speaker is Scott Reese.
You already had 3 minutes, Scott.
Bonus. I get a bonus slot. No, sorry. Do I have to announce?
Yeah, your name and address, please.
Scott Reese, Bromlow Reese and Associates, 13685 Milton, Georgia, Highway 9, Milton, Georgia, 30004. Attended all the meetings. I was originally for the CSO. The last meeting changed my mind. It is now a matter of fact, not conjecture, that 10,000 gallons is the threshold for the state permitting. So our 67 bedrooms, according to the state. So we're only talking about subdivisions of 16, 20 lots. So anything under that, we can't even do. So that should be completely off the table. After the meeting, I think it was pretty apparent that unless you are a subdivision or development the scale of Serenbe or the Manor, it's economically unfeasible for a 25 or 30 lot subdivision to collect the money to replace a system being a standard septic system that is designed to fail. If you build it correctly, you design it correctly, you operate it correctly, it has a lifespan. It's absolute, there's no doubt. It's going to fail. So then you're looking at replacing that system, the smaller subdivisions, the HOAs. The history is not there for them to maintain these. It's going to become then the City of Milton's problem, i.e. the taxpayers. I'm sorry, as a property owner and business owner in the City of Milton, I do not feel like I should be responsible for replacing septic systems in smaller conservation subdivisions. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Walter Recook.
My name's Walt Recook. I live at 615 Scarlet Oak Trail, Milton, Georgia. From day one, I basically say anytime you have an ability to create tools in a toolbox in a community to develop different products, I think that's a good thing. I'm not saying a conservation subdivision shouldn't be a tool within our toolbox, but what I believe you should be doing is looking at this as a zoning classification. There should be something that if a developer wants to use this, if you want to come up with a zoning classification and say that this is a conservation subdivision and that this is a zoning classification that they can use, I say so be it. Go ahead and use that classification, create that district, and allow that to go through a typical zoning process where it will be vented by the public, gone through the public process, where it will be voted on, brought before the commission. Don't have a lot of this language where they have to go through a lot of these different boards, but just have it go through a typical zoning process. That's what a lot of the other jurisdictions do when they do have a conservation subdivision. It's considered a zoning district. And don't regulate it to all subdivisions are having to go through this. It's already zoned AG1 for the majority of our properties. I've said that from day one, and I still continue to say that. The other thing is, of course, the smaller lots. I think if you are going to go with the smaller lots, again, that's a zoning change for many of the people that live around that area. I think it's to their right to be heard. Again, the 60% open space to me seems very unrealistic. I know of no other conservation subdivisions where they have that much open space. To require both a 50-foot setback as well as another 50-foot setback from exterior property lines seems very unrealistic, especially with many times property lines being very uneven. Presently in AG1, we have a restriction that only 25% of the lot can be impervious surface. So when somebody says, oh, AG1's terrible, well, I look at my lot. The majority of my lot is all green. So for someone to say that nothing is green just because you're AG1 is incorrect. A lot of the lots in AG1 are very nice. I've developed some beautiful subdivisions in the Milton. I've developed White Columns. I've developed Triple Crown. Both of them are very pretty. And to say that I can't build any communities like that again just seems like a travesty. These are great communities that have great families living there. And to say the only thing that we can build from now on is a conservation subdivision, I think really will hurt our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Matthew Mitchell.
Good evening. I was actually hoping that the letter that I had sent would get read. I don't know if that's possible or not. Do you have that letter?
I just pulled the letters that were specifically requested to be read into the record. So
I did read it, Matt. It was.
We forwarded it to all the members.
Okay. So I guess what I'll do, since I've got limited time, is I'll hit the highlights of that, and then I did do an item-by-item review of the conservation subdivision ordinance draft. And I'll just read, and hopefully it doesn't sound disjointed because I'm pulling from pieces and editing in kind of standing here.
Sir, can you give your name and your address, please?
Matthew Mitchell, 1750 Providence Farms Lane, a 10-year resident of Milton. And the reason I'm here is because I want to keep Milton as beautiful as it is when we moved here, and I wanted to keep I want it to keep the character that it has that made us want to move here. And I believe a CSO is still a possible solution. I just as strongly believe that this current draft is not that solution. There's still much work to be done to get it where it needs to be to provide the proper framework for Milton's future. I believe the proper experts are not yet in place for its effective completion. I also understand that it would be inappropriate for the city to indefinitely extend the current building moratorium while the ordinance is resolved. I believe the expeditious solution is to modify the existing AG1 requirements and tree ordinance and coordinate the two. If the city and its residents decide to continue with the CSO, it could still be a viable alternative if done properly. After all the discussions and meetings, I've come to believe that a CSO, if done properly, will be a complicated and substantial document. It must be detailed enough to provide the proper framework for maintaining our rural character while being flexible enough to maintain property owners' rights and property values. On a very specific note, I'm not sure how we overcome the hurdles involved in the septic system issues. Because sometimes the complicated solution is not the solution at all, and because I don't think there's a single golden arrow that will solve the entire issue, I'd like to propose an additional approach. I suggest that concurrent to the development of the CSO, we develop proposed modifications to the existing AG1 criteria and to the tree ordinance. I see 4 primary changes to AG1 that could allow AG1 developments to respect Milton's mission and vision. Increase the front and side yard buffers, make sure the wording maintains buffers as native and undisturbed. Maximize green space and minimize internal roadway widths. Require a certain percentage of each lot to be left native and undisturbed. Green lawns are not native and undisturbed. Coordinate the AG1 modifications with the view shed goals and with the tree ordinance. Concurrently, I believe the tree ordinance could be instrumental in helping to preserve Milton's character. I believe it should be modified to create more stringent requirements for tree removal and that it should not allow the transfer of tree save areas. I have 5 pages of comments relative to the ordinance, but I'll just kind of hit the highlights. Making the conservation subdivision the preferred method of subdivision, quote, does nothing. Requiring a public hearing does nothing because the developer is only required to comply with the law. The mayor and city council would have difficulty denying an application without clear criteria. Worse still, the opinion of what, quote, achieves the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan can change with whoever is in office. These requirements for the yield plan are not of sufficient rigor to ensure that the lot count is accurate relative to the maximum number of buildable lots. These requirements will allow the applicant to artificially inflate that number. There are no requirements for engineering or professionally validating the viability of the plan beyond the opinion of the staff and the development director. There is no professional responsibility or liability tied to the yield plan because a design professional is not required, even though it is required for the sketch plan. There are no dimensions or drawing scale requirements to allow dimensional review.
The 3 minutes have passed.
Hey, man,
I was trying to go fast.
I read every word of your
Okay.
letter.
Yeah.
I did.
I've got a little bit more, but okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
The next speaker is Kathleen Johnson.
Hello again, Kathleen Johnson, 385 Taylor Glen Drive, Milton. I am generally in favor of this ordinance. Just a few items of concern. Section 50-138 states that is the preferred method by the city for subdivisions. But then it says, notwithstanding that, applicants can apply for a use permit to get a conventional subdivision. When reading an ordinance, there's a big difference between what is required, may, and shall. Two words that in legalese, very, very important words. What is required and what is, allowed or more discretion. I think under the use permits to do a conventional subdivision, I think there needs to be criteria in there for the council to use in determining whether they're going to grant this application for the use permit for the conventional subdivision. There needs to be criteria that they can follow. Otherwise, I'm afraid that there's just going to be a flood of these special use permits for the conventional subdivisions for developers who do not want to do the conservation subdivisions. That's what's going to be before the council, just special use permits everywhere, I think. Also, I think there's too many density bonuses. I think, as we were talking about earlier tonight, the impact fee could be, once we hopefully have that in place, that could be an incentive for land conservation. They can get a reduced impact fee for the green space that they are providing in a conservation subdivision. That should be an incentive rather than some of the other density bonuses that are right now in the ordinance. And I also think buffers, one of the big reasons for this conservation subdivision is to protect the rural viewshed. I mean, that's a lot of what a lot of people want now. So to do that from the road and what you view, I think the buffers should be increased rather than just the 40-foot buffers in the regular AG1. I think to increase the buffer would increase your rural viewshed, and I think that is an important part. And right now they're discretionary, it seems like, again, with the shall versus the may. I think increased buffers that are required for these conservation subdivisions would help preserve that rural viewshed. Let's see. And also with the community, the wastewater systems, with the other concerns about an HOA or failing or something, and the wastewater treatment's failing, it says the city can be a trustee of that. Again, there's not a requirement for them to be the trustee. Again, it says may. So I just wanted to know if they are definitely, if that's going to be the fallback, and there should be a fallback in case an HOA or whoever cannot maintain that. It should be the city or someone else as the fallback, and there should be a required fallback. And I think that's all my comments right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Jack Linden.
Good evening, Council. I'm Jack Linden. I live at 14810 East Bluff Road in Milton. I am in favor of this ordinance. I think that the concept of conservation subdivisions is one that's been shown over the decades to be a good one that increases property value and makes money for the developers, as well as increasing property values for all the members of the community. I would have one comment similar to what Kathy just said. One of my concerns about the way the ordinance is written is I was hoping there would be larger buffers along the public streets that border the subdivisions. The 40-foot buffer, rural buffer that's in the ordinance, the zoning board, the zoning regulations now is insufficient, I think, particularly since often it is not an undisturbed buffer. I would like to see some sort of an increase in that particular provision to increase it to 100 or maybe even 150 feet so that the view sheds are maintained throughout the community, which has been one of the major concerns expressed in all the meetings that we've had. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Curtis Mills.
Good evening. Excuse me. My name is Curtis Mills. I live at 16355 Birmingham Highway. That's directly across from Blue Valley on Birmingham, about a mile north of the Crossroads. I also, my place of business is at the Crossroads in what was called the Old Birmingham Hotel until the 1930s. That's the green building behind the Wells Fargo branch. I bought that 5 or 6 years ago, restored it, and 2 or 3 years ago I bought what used to be called Bice's Store. It's now Wilbur and Rudy's, the old general store at the Crossroads. I tell you all that just to say, oh, and I live on a 40-acre farm, so I have a high personal interest in preserving Milton the way it is. I love the place, I always have, and that's my only agenda, no profit motive or anything else. What do I have, 45 minutes? Sorry, that's a joke. But for the record, I'd like to point out that Commissioner Edwards is looking particularly handsome tonight.
Spoken as a past, you're wasting time.
Well, I'm going to use my whole 3 minutes. I was opposed to conservation subdivisions originally, largely because of all the issues around septic, sewer, et cetera. I can't argue with that. I'm going to make a big leap and say that I'm setting that aside and assuming smarter people will deal with it. But I like the concept of what I'm calling a CSO an awful lot. It has a lot to offer, but I think it's got to be a winner for everyone. It's got to be a winner for the residents, the people that buy there, for the developers, and for the rest of Milton. My concern is the rest of Milton will lose, and obviously this backfires if that happens. I've got 5 issues. One of them I consider to be very important, or a couple of them very important. One maybe a deal killer. So I would be in favor of this ordinance with the right conditions in place. I think as written, it would be unacceptable to me. The bonus density, I'm not sure how anyone with a straight face can say we can afford one more extra car on our streets under any circumstances. If that's required to balance the equation and make it worthwhile for the developers, maybe it doesn't make sense. I don't know, but traffic's absurd. Yield determination, I thought the wording in the draft was a little bit mushy. Like to see certification be very, very tight there so that we understand exactly what the yield would have been under normal AG1 development. I had an issue with 10% of the green space being allowed for active either amenities or other development.
It's been 3 minutes, Mr. Mills.
Okay, 50-foot buffer's a showstopper. I actually printed pictures for you guys of a 50-foot buffer across the street from me. Can I?
You can come and drop it off for us. And
permission
also,
to
yeah.
approach the bench?
And also,
denied.
And it goes to everybody. You can, hey, Mr. Mills, you can email your comments to Robin to make sure they're for the record, because as this goes through the process, it's going to be a part of that. Because this is just the first step of council and all that stuff.
Well, my understanding was you all were approving something to go to council. But I'll do that.
Oh, okay.
And I miss you guys a lot.
Yeah. Thank you.
Is this your pool house? Is this what this is?
It is now.
Okay.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Laura Rencher.
Well, if you're looking at that picture, that is a 40-foot buffer that was specifically stated as a rural view shed by the Board of Zoning Appeals when they granted a variance. That's what I look at every morning when I come out of my driveway, 40 feet. And so 50 feet is nothing.
Thank you.
My name is Laura Rencher. I live at 1060 Birmingham Road. I'm going to try to do this very quickly. First, I want to quote a survey that Preserve Rural Milton just completed with about 500 respondents, and every one of it was unanimous that the number one reason people moved here, or it wasn't unanimous, but it was definitely a strong majority, was for the rural character. So I think that although people may not quite understand how this is going to help the rural character, I think from my understanding it's going to be very important to it. And the other point I wanted to make is we only have 7,000 acres left over 5-acre plats. Conservation plan recommends 2,500 to be preserved through conservation subdivisions or something. I can't remember the exact. And so if that's the case, we don't have much choice other than to make this mandatory. We've got to up our conservation. Okay, so let's go to the ordinance. First concern I have is the yield plan. Let's see. The yield, well, let's see, current. Not the yield plan, the green space. The green space, it says that the green space should be 60% of the gross land on the acreage, and I prefer it to be buildable land. So I'm fine with it going back to, say, 50% of the buildable land, but it is important to make it buildable land. This is too big of a hole to get increased density. Let's see. The buffers, I do think we need more buffers, particularly at the street, and they don't need to be part of the setback, which is what they're set up as now, which really doesn't give us, I don't really consider it a buffer if it's part of somebody's backyard. So on the right-of-ways, I would assume they need to be at least 100 feet, and on the perimeter, at least 50 feet. Now, that said, I think on the larger lots, it's probably, and especially over an acre, the perimeter may not be necessary. But still, the front needs to be preserved so we can have the benefit of the rural viewshed. The permit for conventional subdivisions, that's very unclear to me exactly what criteria would be needed for approval, and it really opens the door for politics to get involved, and so I think you've really got to define that. It's just too easy to make it all political. Septics. The septic is fairly clear, but I think it needs to be more clear about a very clear plan about maintenance.
3 minutes is up.
Okay. And then, the only density bonus I think that should be allowed is for public use. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Julie Zahner Bailey.
Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Julie Zahner Bailey, and I live at 255 Hickory Flat Road. I'd first just like to thank you for your time. These meetings have been valuable. It's been a great process. I think we've learned a lot. While I appreciate the efforts of the outside consultant in the City of Milton to preserve and conserve rural elements of our community, I'm extremely concerned with the current draft that's before us. There are many unintended consequences, and those have not yet been mitigated. First of all, the introduction of community septic systems throughout all of Milton remains a tremendous risk. There's been no confirmation as to who would bear the financial responsibility of failing community septic systems or the related health issues that could arise from failing systems and their impact on adjacent landowners and wells. At the last meeting at the Alpharetta Government Center, the EPD was clear that there are risks with these systems. They do fail, and ultimately the City of Milton would have to bear those risks, including the Milton taxpayers. That's simply unacceptable. The language surrounding community septic systems remains too vague. Separately, the legal issues tied to how to prevent community septic systems from being used for other unintended high-density uses remain unanswered. The allowance of 8,000 square foot lots, which is 5.5 units to the acre, is hardly rural, and it's inconsistent with the rural landscape of much of Milton. The yield plan as currently written is incongruous and is not appropriate, as it does not require the science or the math to truly prove density neutrality. This was always proposed as density neutral. The yield plan does not allow for density neutrality to be validated. The definition of green space within the current CSO includes many, many things that are clearly not green space, specifically sewer systems, stormwater facilities, utility easements, active impervious areas, such as tennis courts, basketball courts, swimming pools, detention ponds, barns, practice show rings, outdoor riding rings, all to be considered green space. Candidly, it's not green space. We know green space, that's not it. Inadequate buffers for adjacent properties. 50 feet is not adequate, and the fact that 150 feet would be to the discretion of one or two folks is simply unacceptable. I have a property right, everybody in Milton has a property right, and that is that we should not have to bear the risk of high density or community septic on our peripheral land. Density bonuses are offered to the developers within the CSO up to 10%. We've heard many citizens say that that's not appropriate. Density neutrality was what was proposed, and this is not consistent with density neutrality. Lot standards that are noted allow for structures that are way too close to one another. The front, the side interior lines, the adjacency to streets, and rear setbacks are too minimal in many instances. When you can have a side interior line that's as tight as 10 feet, and in some some instances, a rear setback as close as 20 feet. That's hardly rural. That's not what I want at the back of my property. And I've lived here for 27 years and expect a rural environment. That's not rural. The application of the CSOs on parcels with as few as 5 acres is inappropriate based on the cost constraints of community septic, not to mention the proliferation of community septic within Milton and the additional financial burden that would place on city and taxpayers. I agree with an earlier comment that
3 minutes
enhancing the
have passed.
AG1 development standards is the way to go. It's easy, it's appropriate, and I've got about 10 things that I would recommend separate from this evening to have you consider for AG1 development standard enhancements. Bless you and thanks.
Thank you. All right, any more public comment? Robin?
Yes, we have 2 more.
Okay.
Mr. Bernard Wolf.
Yeah, that's what I was counting.
It came in.
Hi, my name's Bernard Wolf. I live on 1000 Lackey Road. We call it Lakapani. We've been here for 67 years. I grew up here pretty much. My family, as such, we wanted to sell our property, which is 113 acres. I bound together with several neighbors. We now have 234 acres. I did not want our property to be destroyed like Milton is by one lot, 1 acre development, which is destroying our city. I wanted to be able to keep our property and make it beautiful and yet also be able to sell it at a price where our family could do real well. We work with a company called Historical Concepts that for years has done conservation development. They know how to do it. They're doing it basically all over the world and now work in the Hamptons. I spent 3 years looking at all this and working it out. Let me explain it. That's why I'm really here. The whole concept of conservation development, I call it 21st century, means the lot is secondary. The main part is a natural area you have in your property. It's analogous to having an apartment in New York or a place in the beach. Your lot is no longer your home. The confine is the entirety of your community. You'll group houses together in a certain area, hidden maybe in woods, so you can have the pasture for your kids to play football on or have a horse, things like that. You enjoy it. That's your amenity. Typically, it costs less to develop these. You have a footprint also that you build your house on. That's what you consider, even though it's a lot. As such, the land that's in a green area is equally as important as the footprint that your house is in. That's your community. That's what you live in. The roads tend to be rural in nature because you're maintaining the natural areas. Houses can be grouped together, but they are done in a way that you don't see them from the street. If you can, you try to have them in the trees. And by the way, that's the most energy efficient approach you can have for your house. You can have more density with this because, again, you're grouping your house together, and the whole idea here is to maintain a rural feel. If you can get them more closely together, it is more rural. I did want to mention also about the sewer system. We have looked into this very much. The system that we're looking at in Lakapani is used at Serenbe. It's all natural. Basically, it's a briar patch followed by an anaerobic, looks like a tennis court. The pumps that they use, you can buy at Northern Tool for just not much money, 2-inch PVC pipes operated. It takes the water, goes through this, it comes out 98% pure. You can run out to a pasture, which is done. Water is, it's a very simple system. I need to mention also...
3 minutes has elapsed.
Okay. You can have these remotely monitored. There's sensors on it where the individual tanks can be monitored. You could do it here to see if they're in compliance, if they're operating.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you all.
The next and last comment card is from Bill Hosmer or Hosmer.
I'm definitely not in favor of this proposal.
What's your address, sir? Sorry.
I'm sorry. Bill Hosmer, 235 Weatherwood Circle, Milton. I won't be redundant or repeat anything that is already my feeling that someone else has already stated. But as someone who's been part of a homeowners association for a long time, the requirement of the homeowners association, this ordinance, is it's ridiculous. The HOA should receive training in order to be conversant in wildlife habitat conservation, enhancement, and maintenance. I can't get people in my subdivision to volunteer to be the secretary or the treasurer to show up for meetings. So to expect with turnover for every person to come in and have to be trained as a wildlife or habitat expert is a little bit much. They also the HOA shall develop a long-term conservation plan for maintenance of common areas. This plan should include examples of environmentally friendly landscaping techniques for homeowners. Can't even get half the people in the subdivision to get their grass cut once a week. So some of the requirements for the HOA are just, I understand where they're coming from, but in a perfect world, it would be great, but it's just not practical. The golf course, without a golf course, I think would be the best case scenario, but I don't think any builder is going to build what's going to be the best case for anything but profit, which I have no problem with. That's what they should do. I more see 100 acres with 60 saved and then 5 homes per acre on the other 40. So today in Milton, we have about 80% of the lot, 80% of the properties are at least 1 acre. So if you have 100 acres with your amenities and whatnot, you're going to put 70 homes on it currently. If we have this ordinance on 100 acres, if 60 are going to be now saved for green space, we can put 5 houses per acre on the other 40. So now instead of 70 homes for 100 acres, we have as many as 200 homes. I'm sorry, 70 homes on 100 acres. We have now, I'm seeing a furrowed brow there. On 100 acres now, you're going to get 70 homes out of it when you figure out amenities and whatnot. Once we have this ordinance, if that same 100 acres, if we have to save 60 of it, means we have 40 remaining to develop. On that 40, we can put up to 5 houses per acre. So we can now have 200 homes on that 100-acre area, correct?
No, sir.
No.
I'm sorry that my math is wrong.
It's a neutral yield. You can't have more than what you would have otherwise.
You'd have
Okay.
70 on the remaining.
I missed that part. Forgive me.
Without the
Scratch
bonus.
that. But
Okay.
there's nothing rural about having 25 feet between houses. There's nothing rural about having a community septic system. And with all due respect to our consultant, there's nothing rural about becoming like Gwinnett. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is the end of our public comment cards.
Okay.
Move we close public comment.
Second.
Oh, we got one.
Oh, we got one.
We got
Come
some
on.
in the back.
Let's go. Bring it up, man.
On the wire.
It's okay.
Sharon Mays.
Hi, I'm Sharon Mays, and I live at 15160 High Grove Road in Milton, Georgia. She has my notes now, so I will just give you a couple of comments from. Oh, thank you very much. I think the concept and the desire is admirable. We do need to look at ways and different options to preserve what we all have come to love here in Milton. We also moved up here for the green space, the rural character, and the thing that seems to be missing in this is that I feel that the view shed is the important. We keep talking about the view from the road. I think the view from the road is very important, but I think a lot of people moved here because they like the view from their backyard. And I would be concerned. I'm not happy with the way the buffers are written, the way the setbacks are written, of what's going to be what we're going to be looking at from our backyards. The character, the 50-foot buffer is inadequate. Calling anything that's recreational areas or anything that's not buildable land as a green space is a farce. I am concerned about the language of having the CSO as the preferred method. If
if we do go forward with something like this, I don't think we need to be limiting our options. We need to look at all options for a given parcel of land. I don't like the CSO the way it's written. I think you've got too many holes in it. It's a slippery slope with these community septic systems. But by all means, you want to have more than one option in developments in the area. Again, as the previous person said, there just doesn't seem a whole lot to be rural about this proposal. It just seems high density to me. And, you know, people talk about, well, we want people to have, the kids to have a place to run and play. Our kids ran and played from neighborhood, from yard to yard to yard, in and out of each other's houses. They did not need a soccer field to learn how to play and to enjoy each other's neighborhood. We don't need back-to-back and 20 such small stamp-sized lots. That is not the rural character that we moved up here for, and neither is it the rural, what I want to see for my backyard. Thank you.
Thank you. There's no more public comment. Going once, going twice. All right. We'll close public comment. I'll open up for questions for the consultant or staff from the commission.
Oh, boy.
Y'all fight over it. All right, I'll start it off. With the septic issue, let's go ahead and get to that with the... Can you, Chris, maybe you can help me, or Don, explain exactly, because the way I understood it as far as the EPD is that it may be required that there's a trustee on that. So the HOA kind of is the first line of defense, and the HOA fails, or whoever fails, there's the trustee who's the second line of defense. And what I kind of gathered was this, everyone kind of, all the developers or landowners prefers the city to be that trustee. So my question is, what happens when the city takes it over as trustee? And I don't know if Chris wants to answer that, or...
Yeah, let me take a first crack at it, Mr. Chairman. My understanding is that there are three parties in this. The developer who builds it, and he may have a utility company that's going to own it and operate it later, who joins him in building it. Well, let's say there's the developer, there is the operator, and there is the trustee. Those are the three parties, to my understanding, that the Georgia EPD looks for. My understanding, they prefer that the trustee be a local government entity, as I mentioned. Could be a city, could be a county, could be a utility authority. I have learned as of today, it can be the homeowner association. The homeowner association can be the trustee of last resort, but what cannot be but the HOA cannot own it and also be a trustee. These parties have to be different. So a private corporation can take ownership of the community's waste system, can buy it from the developer and operate it, with the HOA being the trustee. That is my understanding. As to what happens when a city when a government is the trustee and has to act in a capacity, again, my understanding is they can come in with their forces and right the ship, operate the system, improve it. They can bring in a private contractor, again, a licensed operator, and let me repeat, anybody who operates, it has to be licensed, a licensed operator with the state. So that's my rough understanding of the parties. Now, I know that's an accurate understanding of the three parties. What cities have actually experienced, I couldn't tell you, other than you usually have a base of users. There are people and homeowners in the subdivision who have to use that system, and they can be charged a fee to use that system.
So I guess my two follow-up questions are, if the city takes it over and they have to pay the expenses, is the taxpayer on the hook, or is or is the individual HOA homeowner on the hook? But more importantly is if we have another recession and we have these community wastewater systems in the ground and we have I don't even know if we have an HOA,
Right.
who takes that over and what's the process? I mean, that's my question.
Let me see if I can take a stab at that. I think largely Don's correct in what he's described so far as to the different parties and how they interact. I do know that one of the things that George is going to look for is this third-party trust indenture. And I do know that there is the ability to have somebody from the private sector who manages these types of systems be that person. I'm not lost on the fact, though, that they do, in fact, like a municipality or a county to be that first line of defense. What I've seen in some circumstances is that there would be 3 years of operating funds in some capacity bonded or insured or in escrow or some way held so that if the system were to fail that it could continue to operate for a period of time. Having said that, I've also explored with some of the operators of these systems and said, and just philosophically thrown out a concept to them and said, look, so the city signs on to be a third-party trust indenture in one of these things, and let's just say it fails. What does it have to contain for you as an operator to look at it and see that it's attractive to come and want to take it over? Because if you're looking to the private sector, they've got to be able to make money to be able to. They're not going to come take a system over that loses money. And we've heard between Carter and I, we've heard that systems. There's some of those private firms or some of those private operators that kind of have a sweet spot at about 25 residential units. I talked to one yesterday that said we wouldn't even look at it if it wasn't 100 residential units or more. And that is, if there is a longer-term concern, and of course I'm dabbling now a little bit in what the council would decide as their policy decision in this topic. So with that disclaimer, there is the possibility, I guess, and I could frame a story that would say that the city would be in that third-party trust indenture position and would be the operator of a facility that would not have the interest of the private sector to come take it over. And then in answer to your question, which your question was, is there any capacity in which the taxpayer in Milton could be responsible for these systems? I can tell a story that gets to yes. I think there are ways, and the city attorney and I have talked at length at ways to protect ourselves. And, I wish I could sit here and say this is the way I think we should protect ourselves, but it's almost as though each of these systems is built differently, built upon size and type and capacity and what it looks like in the ground and what it looks like in drain fields and what the system, how it functions. I don't know that I can sit here and tell you, I think we need to be insured to this level with this level of bonded and this much money in escrow. It's a combination of those things that in each circumstance would try to mitigate that risk as much as it could.
Thank you.
Yeah, Chris, by that description, for me, what I'm hearing you say is that whether you want to be or not, by default, the city ends up in the waste management business, if not by taking it over after failure in a trustee role, but by monitoring. I know it's monitored by the state and they are licensed, but I don't think that we would engage in, let me say it differently, I don't know that we could be responsible for figuring out the multitude of systems that might be out there without saying, yes, this one is acceptable to Milton, this one's not, at some level. So suddenly, whether we want to be or not, we're in the regulation business for saying that these 3 or these 5 or these 7 are acceptable and these 9 are not, if there's that many different operators out there. So suddenly you are engaged at some level of measure.
I would think that if we move forward with a community septic option, and we'd certainly find if we do, we would look towards some preferred operators on the front end, and almost that, we have a house fire, we know who we're going to call to board up the house. So, I hate to relate it to that type of a situation, but we want to be prepared for the back end on the front end.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Don, excuse me, Don.
Yes, Mr. Edwards.
On Cerebi, how many homes are in that development?
Well, you would ask me that. My understanding is it's around, I think the build-out's around 400. I don't think they have 400 in there right now. I think just eyeballing it, it looks like they got 100, 150.
So the next question, probably questionable also, is how much is their homeowner dues?
Well, that figure I do know because the operator, it was at a couple of our meetings. They bill them around $50 to $55 a month. That's their fee to the wastewater system. I was surprised it was that low, too.
That's just for that, for the septic.
Yes, sir, for the wastewater. I'm not sure what, I'm sure that,
Maintenance and all that is on top of that,
right, I'm sure their water supply is a different bill.
and maintenance.
Well, no, that's the, I believe that's everything, that's the whole ball of
Total
wax.
included?
It's maintenance and operating costs. That's not correct.
Hold on a second.
Atlanta Water, the $54 is wastewater, and then there is another HOA fee on top of that. For grounds maintenance, common area maintenance.
Oh,
Right.
for other, yeah,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
for things
Thank you.
other than wastewater, I see,
Right.
yeah. Gotcha.
That's all I had for.
Don, I have a question. I think I heard you say during your presentation that Fulton County has become a trustee in some instances for this. Did I hear you say that correctly?
No, but I've been told their water and sewer department is in the position to be one. I do not know whether they have.
Okay.
I do not know that. But they are a type of entity that could. My understanding is Forsyth County has been. Their water and sewer utility has been a trustee.
Don, I have another question. In the documents that were presented to us this time, you used 5 acres as a minimum standard for this. And thinking about some of the community meetings that I sat through, 5 was not a number that I remember being acceptable to the community. So there's a difference between what I was hearing from the voices represented there and what you guys have presented back to us. Can you explain the 5 acre minimum that you chose?
I was trying to find a consistent number in the 5 acre tract in AG1 could, in theory, produce 4 or 5 lots, assuming it had frontage on an existing roadway. If you envision that, I guess the real issue is what a 5.5 or 6 acre site. There are not going to be many sites like that have that kind of frontage to where you really could do 5 lots. But if you apply conservation, the CSO to it, that's 3 acres that would be in permanent green space and either 4 or 5 houses on the remaining 2 acres, which would mean they're basically at half-acre lots or slightly below half an acre in size. The other factor in this was what is a minor subdivision under existing city ordinances, and that's 3 lots or less. In other words, if you own a tract, you can create 2 new lots in addition to the parent lot, and that's a minor subdivision right now that requires no real review and no detailed improvements. So I was factoring that in. A minor subdivision in AG1 is would be 3 1-acre lots.
And the vision that came to me when I was reading that was inconsistent with some of the things that I had heard at those public comment, public input meetings, where people were talking about the depth and moving it off the road and making sure they're preserving the view sheds. And when I think about a 5-acre parcel, I just don't envision enough depth unless it's a flag type lot to get it far enough away that even with the 60% conservation area, that you would remove the home development, the density part of it, far enough to not be perceived as a cluster and visible from the street.
Well, something I've had a hard time wrapping my head around is the term, what is a rural view, and what is rural character? And I'm getting up in years. I've spent a lot of my life driving around the South, and Texas to Virginia, Washington D.C. I've lived there. I know what the Carolinas look like. I know what South Georgia looks like. I know what South Louisiana looks like. There are lots of houses on farms that are pretty much right near the roadway. We drive down to the Okefenokee about every year. I see how the roads look and how houses are, and I'm talking about houses built before World War II and before World War I in many cases. That, to me, is the rural southern view that is in my brain. The idea that you should force all development in a way so that it's not seen from the roadway does not strike me as an authentic view of what rural development is, either here or anywhere else. And the problem I've had with in some cases with a buffer being rigidly applied to push things away from the roadway is that it just seems an arbitrary wish to not see the development at all. You know, under existing AG1, you certainly see the development. And I felt like, why should conservation design subdivisions have even more buffers, more extensive buffers applied to them than a conventional AG1 subdivision? That was my thinking behind building in a flexible buffer requirement, so that small lots that did truly impact some existing houses around the periphery of the conservation subdivision, both the community development director or the planning commission, either one of you all could say, wait a minute, you need an extensive buffer here. And that ought to be certainly in your purview. I mean, it is hard. The reason, and I understand that there were many comments about that, and somebody said, well, I think they said it's kind of mushy, or maybe that was the yield plan they applied that to. But when you try to build some flexibility, set some rules, but then establish some flexibility, in a way you cannot avoid the mushiness. The idea was to give discretion and to use those elevation drawings as a way to say, wait a minute, this is too much of a view, this is too visible, this is too much in the face of the adjoining area, and then give staff and you all the tools to change that. Whereas just a flat out 150 foot, there may be times when 150 feet is not enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
But one more part of this lengthy answer. The problem I have seen, and it was exemplified in the comparative drawings that we saw at a couple of our meetings, a lot of the lots that are being built in conventional subdivisions are illegal. They're double frontage lots. Your ordinance prohibits that right now. You cannot put a cul-de-sac in a piece of property, wrap it around, and then have the lot front the cul-de-sac and front the existing road. That's a double frontage lot. And I can get you the code section that prohibits it. I merely repeated it in the conservation provisions. That should be prohibited because nobody wants to see the backyard of a house, even if it's a 5,000 square foot mansion with a swimming pool and a tennis court.
I think we're going to have to call upon you next time that developer comes in and wants to.
Well, I'd be happy to.
Before us as a consideration. I mean, the part that I struggle with, Don, and I certainly applaud your effort, and I think you've given us a good document to work with. We had to put a stake in the ground somewhere.
I understand.
I think the challenge that we've all had as a planning commission is trying to figure out how do we represent the voice of the community that has said we've seen enough development here that is changing the complexion of Milton. And so we were seeking out a solution to get there. And conservation subdivision, certainly by the title of it alone, is an attractive place to start. The tools of it and how it has to be administered has gotten trickier.
Right.
As you know from monitoring and administering this through the process. So I think what we heard tonight, both by the number of folks who spoke into the record and as we heard over the course of the formal meetings that we had where we engaged the community, is that we're not quite sure yet still what it means. I think it's still an evolving definition that we're looking for. And there certainly are some workable tools in the document that you've given us to help move us forward. But I think collectively, we still have some work to do.
I agree, and this is the decision for you all. And I think one of the valid points for you and the council to consider is the type of things you want to allow in the green space. That figure of 20,000 square feet, just to put this in perspective, 2 tennis courts or 14,000 square feet. you all may want to drop that number to 20,000. You may want to eliminate tennis courts from being a kind of facility. But there are, you might ought to consider. I'm told there's a stadium in London where you play tennis on lawn. It's actually a grass surface. So it would not be unheard of to have clay or grass tennis courts and say that would be okay in a green space. But again, that is a judgment call by the city leaders of Milton and your values as to what should or should not go into green space. Some of these other facilities, remember these are AG1 largely. That's what we're talking about. Some of these barns and riding facilities, those are permissible right now in AG1. Everyone should, keep that in mind, that the zoning, some of the complaints we heard about tonight involve things that are legal right now. And some of the complaints about lack of public input or insufficient notice, I find disingenuous in that there are no requirements for public notice now or any kind of public hearing now for conventional subdivisions. So we at least, I think, we're trying to step in a direction where this planning commission or somebody, a body of the city of Milton, would give citizens a forum and get their input, because building subdivisions is not a subdivision is not just a building permit writ large. There is too much discretion in where streets can be designed and where green space should go and how lots should be oriented. That, to me, has always been an argument for some kind of planning commission review of subdivisions. There's so much discretion involved. Closing thing, two comments. The ordinance you have in front of you clearly is it's not a verbatim, but it is in the mainstream of Randall Lawrence model codes. It is in the mainstream and derived from the University of Georgia's recommended model code designed by Laurie Fowler and recommended to the North Georgia Water Management District and to the Atlanta Regional Commission. So what you have in front of you is merely a slightly upgunned version of those two model codes. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'll get a question if I could just ask one that I came with. I was at the last of the public meetings, and I think I heard from the public, and I think I've heard consistently through this process that it's been the desire that if we move into this community septic type system, that it's one that the EPD would be the regulatory authority for, as opposed to having Fulton County be the regulatory authority, which they are today for the individual septic. Knowing that the EPD kicks in at 10,000 gallons per day, and knowing the calculations that they use to get to that 10,000 gallons per day, you can take 10,000 and divide it by 150 per bedroom, and you get 67 bedrooms. And 67 bedrooms is a lot of bedrooms to fit on 5 acres, 6 acres, or 7 acres. So I see a conflict. I guess I want to ask that question as to how we're at the fact that we wanted EPD to be the regulatory authority, but we're now looking at lot sizes that just don't drive 67 bedrooms.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a complete disconnect for me, Chris. You make a good point.
I was gonna say, even if this could be enacted, the minimum lot sizes have to be upped.
And that's not to say that everybody uses
the parcel.
The usable that's the way the calculations are done, as I understand
parcel.
it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I think Scott, he mentioned that in his comment.
Just a comment.
We still have some bad information about what we can and can't do in the wastewater system.
I'll get you to Matt, right?
Yes.
I'll get you in 1 second.
Okay.
Let me take a stab at my understanding is, as Chris said, the 10,000 threshold, that is one threshold. For the individual permit, that different class of permits, Matt got some confirmation, and you can confirm this or not, that the individual permit is available for that kind of small subdivision you all have just mentioned. And now maybe, Paul, I understand your concern about why are we even, anything below 10 acres, why are we even considering that? My understanding is a a developer could apply to EPD for what amounts to septic tanks with drain fields that extend into a green space. And it is not a, the only reason you're going to EPD is because the local county health department says we don't have jurisdiction over that sort of thing. It essentially is a conventional septic tank system that extends the drain field off-site into the common area green space. And the developer could apply for 5, 6, 7 lots that have that kind of
But
configuration.
Don, I'm still confused. Apply to who? Here's the disconnect.
To EPD.
EPD for something less than 10,000 gallons?
That is our understanding.
My understanding was that the EPD wouldn't touch anything. And Matt,
How's that?
hang on, Matt.
Yeah,
Just
well,
let me-
I'm
let
gonna
me
get you. Hold on.
I'm going to get the thought out, then you can address my thought. Is that the EPD won't address anything less than 10,000. And yet, I'm sorry, over 10.
Over 10.
And then you've got Fulton County that says by their own regulation, they can't address anything that's going to cross a property line.
Correct,
For a
yeah.
shared septic. So there's this gap there for
Right.
me that I haven't heard a satisfactory resolution for. So now, Matt, maybe.
Yeah, Matt.
It's real simple. We're
Should come to the,
We come on up and introduce yourself because you're an expert in the field.
Matt Vinson,
and
Public
your
Health
address- and your
Department.
address,
Yeah,
please,
what's
Matt.
your
Sorry?
address? What's your address?
Oh, address 105 Whippoorwill Court, Eatonton, Georgia. So I didn't think you needed that. Department of Public Health operates the county boards of health. County boards of health can write permits up to 2,000 gallons per day. They have a memorandum of understanding with EPD that can put them in the 2 to 10,000 gallons per day. But as you said, it has to be on the same piece of property. It can't go across the property line. So EPD's realm covers everything that the Department of Public Health can't cover. Over 10,000 gallons a day can be written under the general permit.
Right.
They can do anything, even less than 10,000, under an individual permit. And that's where all the discrepancy and the
Well,
misinformation
yeah,
is.
and unfortunately-
It's that simple. It's pretty much that simple.
Unfortunately, the woman from the EPD did not do anybody any favors the other night with her.
They did not.
her
They
lackluster
took the issue
description
and
of
really,
how that went.
yeah. I think they confused everybody with some. They could have simplified the answers, and I think
Yeah.
part of that is they didn't know the angle at which the questions were coming from. They didn't understand the whole general versus individual, and people in the
Because
audience thought
individual does
individual
not
was.
necessarily mean an individual as a homeowner.
That's right. It's the individual permit from the EPD versus the general permit, and that's where they confused everyone. I think so.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I'm almost done.
I guess just one, going back
Fire
to
away.
just to going back to the septic plan, it seems to me that if we went with this, every plant that we allowed would create a contingent liability for the city.
Correct.
So, just
A couple more for Don. Sorry, Don. Keep putting it up. I didn't hear again, in attending the community engagement meetings that we hosted, I did not hear a lot of enthusiasm for the density bonuses. And
Right.
yet the density bonuses written into the ordinance or the document that you presented to us tonight. Can you help me understand the reappearance of the density bonus? Is that a motivation for the developers, basically?
It is, and and you could see how well it worked tonight.
Yeah. You got a lot of attention.
But the reality is there's one of the criteria there where we pretty much need to do it. If a developer were to offer green space as public land, well, I guess he can voluntarily do it, but the Supreme Court has some very strict guidelines there if you're going to try and take some of it as public land. You've got to trade. A local government has to give something of value to it. You cannot merely take it as an exaction. So the use or access to green space by the general public. Remember, this green space is private green space. It's available only to the subdivision. If you want to make a trail system that anybody can go through that trail, you've got to offer something to the developer to satisfy, as Bill Ross said, that nexus requirement that the courts have said. And that's to protect property owners from being over-regulated on this sort of thing.
Okay. And Thank you for that.
As far as community wastewater, again, that was the idea was, we heard lots of fear. You've heard that allegation made again tonight that these things are totally infeasible below a certain level. Well, the idea was give the developer a couple of additional lots as a way to address those extra costs. These things exist all over the country. There are developers somewhere that are making them work with community waste systems. That's all I can tell you.
The last area that I wanted to address with you was, again, sort of a public outcry in making their wishes known again this evening, which is consistent with what I have heard in the public meetings that we hosted, was the disconnect between what is going to be true green space, undisturbed, natural, or what's the word that Matt used this evening? Native green space. And yet we're introducing in this document the fact that there's passive recreation and some active recreation. It's inconsistent with what we heard the community say. Is there a reason that it's written back in that way and it's not as native and passive?
Right. Again, I think some of the active recreation in terms of sports fields, if it's a soccer field or a football field, I'm not sure why that should be prohibited. But again, it's up to you all and the community. If the community feels these things are inappropriate, I understand that. But again, I think that we all need to keep in mind, if it's zoned agriculture, you can certainly put hen houses, paddocks, barns.
Yeah, I get
that.
that.
All those facilities are, and perhaps those types of facilities may be acceptable to the community.
Yep.
Whereas a tennis court is not. That's clearly a judgment call for this community to decide.
The part that just to be very frank, and this is not and it will sound critical, and maybe it is that we made a pretty big promise to the community when we engaged them in the process that we would hear their voice and that we would reflect that back into a document that is in the spirit of Milton as we have known it, is a part of our mission statement and our vision, and that we're going to be true to our word on that. And I'm not necessarily as comfortable as I'd hoped I would be with the document when so many of those things that I've addressed to you this evening are written back in, when that is completely inconsistent with that promise that we made. So that's a big disconnect for me.
I would not be offended if there are significant changes recommended by this body or by the council or by the staff in this ordinance. But keep in mind, the ordinance will not do any of us any good if it is not used. And that has been the problem in some of our surrounding jurisdictions. If it's not used, or if insufficient green space is protected, it really won't make much difference.
Yeah, it's the unintended consequences part that I'm struggling with tonight.
Right.
Because I know what my personal intention was with engaging my interest in having the community engage and the city engage on conservation subdivisions, and that was to try to preserve what has been rural Milton and what we all have moved here for and are so outspoken about. But where I think the unintended consequence comes in is that if I just take it for the written words on the page, in my mind is pretty developer friendly, much more so than I expected the document to be at the end. And so either we've got a choice to make tonight. Do we take the document and which we have done in the past at great pain, go on page by page, paragraph by paragraph, and rewritten it to a Milton-spirited document? Or do we decide at this point this is a tool that we've considered and that we have given it ample public air and consideration, and decided that it's a tool that in its current form isn't something that's directly applicable to Milton at this point in time? And that's where I guess I would rest my case this evening.
Yeah, on your point, Paul, if you rewrite the document as is maybe suggested, we still will have these same issues from the community on septic. Lot sizes have to be small in order for this to work. You're still going to have those issues that will not be resolved.
That's why I'm suggesting that we have to measure the
Right.
value of that, going through that process, or saying,
Right.
we went through
I
an
agree.
exhaustive effort to bring forward the best document possible to the city, and right now, it doesn't, it's not as applicable as we'd hoped.
Right.
It's not a round peg and a round hole at this point.
Oh,
It's
no.
still a round peg and a square hole.
Can't overcome the biggest obstacle.
As a point of order, are we having questions now, or
Sure.
we're going to have discussion?
Questions and discussion, because
I
this
did-
discussion might involve questions. Do you have any questions as of right now?
No, sir.
Okay. Because what I've gotten out of because I've been to every meeting since October, and I was thinking we could make this work at the very beginning. And at the end of that last meeting, I'm thinking the liability is too much for something I think the community doesn't really want when it's all said and done. I think what I've gotten out of this is we probably need to start making some changes to the AG1, like what we've already done with the 20% lot coverage. That's a big deal because that's 80% green space. Even though it's a front lawn, it's still, 80%. Curb and gutters, they don't have to be a mandatory thing. Give as many incentives to developers in order to have larger lots, impact fees being one, try to do everything we can. That's what I've gotten out of this, is that the community wants that instead of this. And at the end of the meeting with the EPD, that really set it in with me. Any other discussion? Nope. I'd open up for a motion.
I haven't said very much.
Oh, that's good.
No,
That's solid.
All that work be done.
Yeah, no, I purposely not said too much because I think we needed that everybody to be heard and the different perspectives said. So it's been enlightening. I have very little to add. The comments are there, and I could cover each one there. But I think Don, for me, I think you covered where I think we are. There's a way to where we could work through this document and we could mitigate against all of these risks. I think there's ways that you could write in verbiage into the agreements to where an HOA or the city or somebody could take ultimate responsibility for these things and handle our issues at some level. But I think by doing so, we are going to change the nature of the conservation subdivision and the ordinance to a point to where it will not be utilized. And so we can build a perfect thing that we've literally wasted our time in doing it because it won't be utilized, and therefore, at the end of the day, the city of Milton and the people in it, we didn't get a thing out of it. So the process has been valuable. We've learned a great deal, and all of these things that you're looking forward to move into AG1 or to improve where we are. That's just where we are.
Great. Robin, I have a question for you. In reference to what this is, it refers to Chapter 50 of the City Code. I'm prepared to make a motion, but I want to make sure I make the motion
Yeah.
properly.
Basically, this is part of the city code. It is not a part of the zoning ordinance. And
Okay.
this is just, I guess you could call it a courtesy. We've just embedded additional meetings and public hearings, but it's nothing that is legal, that's required by the city charter, because typically amendments to the city code, which Chapter 50 is one, would only require a first and second reading before the city council and their final approval. So all these meetings we've had are not regulated or mandated through the city charter.
Thank you. So I'm prepared to make a motion, but I may need your assistance in just making sure that I'm stating it correctly. My motion would be that I move that at this point in time, that the City of Milton not adopt a conservation subdivision ordinance as a part of our city code. And I'll just leave it at that if that's sufficient.
I believe so as a recommendation, yeah.
All right, got a motion and a second, and Noel told me not to do this. I'm going to thank him for doing this over the last 2 months of spending valuable time of yours to meeting with everyone and trying to get this through. Outside of right now, so thank you, Noel.
I'm sorry, what's
Yeah, and I would also thank Don
Fred.
and Bruce. I mean, you guys, we couldn't get to this point to be able to make a good decision or recommendation to the city without the expert opinions and expertise that you brought to this process. And I don't, by any means, by my motion this evening, intend any disrespect to what you've done for the benefit of Milton. It is beneficial to Milton to have gone through this process. We were very well served by the expertise that you brought to this, and we can't thank you enough for that as well. I'm sorry I can't support what it is that's been brought forward, but I couldn't have made the recommendation without building a better knowledge base, and we have you to thank for that, as well as Noel and what he did commit to this process as well.
All right, got a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
I'll make one comment.
You got it.
The process for us, and I've seen a lot of things in the emails and the comments and the letters that have been written that have singled out different groups because of their viewpoints in there. I think that the process has allowed us to work together, both the conservationists, both the developers, both the individual citizens and the groups. People have been heard. They have worked together. We've got, in this very room right now, we've got developers and conservationists who are in 100% agreement to where we are standing right now. There's difference of opinion as well, but we're working together. I mean, this is clearly the spirit of what was intended. And if we vet each one of the things that we move forward on in some process, it doesn't have to be as elongated as this or as involved. But if we can be open and honest and clear and straightforward with each other and just, get to it instead of the emotional rhetoric that so oftentimes, does get in there, then we can get something done and we can improve this really good thing that we already have. Don't sell it short. We're already winning. So I don't feel bad about any part of this. I'm glad we've done what we've done. We have learned a great deal. We have improved our city by going through it, and I know this board here continues to do it. We're going to.
The challenge is right now, and thank you, Noel, for that as well, is that we're not done. Because we didn't adopt something tonight, we still haven't met the expectation of the community. No. We've held something at bay that I think maybe would have had some unintended consequences, but our work is not done because, as Peyton suggested, there are potentially some other solutions. And working hard on our AG1 description and uses and applications may be the next tool that we go down. Or path we go down and create that, making that a better tool. So I encourage the community, those of you who stuck it out tonight and have been through all the meetings as well, to please stay engaged, because we're not done, and our commitment to you remains the same, is to make sure that we preserve Milton.
Any other discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? That's unanimous. Anything else, Robin?
That is it.
All right, I have a motion for adjournment. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? It's unanimous.